class or whatever, but I didn't know that it was because people literally just can't read the rules or have no mind for them or don't give a fuck about them. There are so many bizarro things with regards to this court case. So one of the things that the opposing counsel wants to do is they want to keep, or they were trying to keep submitting like declarants or affidavits to this case. But then what they would do is they would censor the name in the thing, and then they would submit it to the court. And we don't get like any uncensored versions of any of these submissions. So it's literally like anonymous like witnesses or accusers. And we're kind of doing meet and confers to figure out like, well, you're going to, tell us who this is. And then where we're at right now in our meet and confers is they're saying, well, this is what we've done. We also filed a motion to seal these things. And what we're going to do is if the judge approves it, then we'll file it under seal and then we'll make it available to you. But if he doesn't approve the filing under seal, then we're just going to withdraw it. So they're just like, they're spamming like all these like random things. I say all these random, there's like 4 of them, but it's like they're like half the submissions on this have like redacted shit. I don't even know who the fuck the messages are or where they're from, because like, yeah, it's just like, it's very fucking annoying.
Is this state court or federal court?
It's federal court. They cited a federal statute to get it into federal court, and that's what we are, that's where we're fighting. So Southern District of Florida, I guess. But it's like, that's like on top of like a million other like stupid, they wanted to do, so one of the things, another thing opposing counsels, we're not going to do this too long because I can complain about so much shit. One of the other things opposing counsel do is they want to issue court orders for Kiwi Farms to remove videos of plaintiff, okay? So one, I'm a little bit reluctant to issue any court orders about non-parties to the case because if we're going to, like, let's say theoretically it goes all the way to trial. Let's say theoretically I get convicted, or not convicted, but I lose and they, agree with plaintiff. Well, I don't want more evidence for them to fight for to say, oh, well, look at all these damages, right? Kiwi Farms is not a named party on this case. I don't even know if you can issue court orders to named parties. And a court order is not an injunction, right? You can have something taken down or just get reposted again. So we fought over this a little bit. We're like, well, court orders seem kind of silly, but we're like, okay, listen, if you want to do court orders to take down these videos, that's fine. But can we also take down like all of the videos, like all 30 of them instead of just like the 3 involving plaintiff? And they said, we can do that, but you have to pay all of our court costs so far, all of our legal fees if you want us to do that. I'm like, what? No, what the fuck? So obviously we were contesting that motion. And then, and then we were at our hearing. They were like, isn't it extremely crazy that you're trying to prevent plaintiff from having their videos taken down? It's like, I'm not preventing shit. You can send them whatever you want, but I'm not going to have a court order issued out of my case to a non-party. And you're not even going to agree to take my shit down without me paying you guys for it? Oh my God, there's just so much absolutely unbelievable stuff. Oh, the final thing I'll bitch about, I'm so sorry. We had a huge hearing over, they tried to file a TRO 2 months after the case was filed. Okay, so it's fucking stupid. All right, the judge excoriated them on this. One complained that they had cancer. The other complained that they had a cold for 2 weeks. I'm not joking. Then they rolled that into a preliminary injunction. We had a hearing for this 2 months ago, and as part of this preliminary injunction hearing, it was an open court. Nothing, no, not sealed, not secret or whatever. I think the hearing went very bad for them. And it went so bad for them that right after the hearing happens, I'm happy because finally we get a whole bunch of testimony from me and Jane Doe that's under oath in front of lawyers with direct and cross-examination. They immediately moved to seal the transcript for the public fucking hearing that we had, and now I have to wait months for the judge to rule on the sealing for that. That's been my life for the past few months, but yeah. Anyway.
So if this sounds crazy to the audience, the thing that isn't talked about a lot because it's just kind of like inside baseball in law is that a lot of this preliminary stuff like discovery, etc., is kind of a game of chicken between the parties where, there's gamesmanship that can be played, and the game is kind of like, well, if we go to the judge, who's going to look like an asshole? Because what you don't want to do is be the one who was acting crazy. Then you go to the judge, and now the judge thinks you're irresponsible and doesn't trust you, right? But it's weird because not all parties have the same concern for their reputation. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So
my big issue with this is that because it's all like, because all the filings are public and everything, there's already like the ridiculousness, the fact that like there's a protective order to protect just the name of the plaintiff who is very publicly accused me and publicly already feels like a little bit goofy. And then the fact that obviously it's my reputation that's being attacked the entire time. So in terms of me, like the damages are always, mounting as the case progresses. And the plaintiff has literally nothing to lose. And so I have to balance out like, okay, well, what can I even lose if I lose the case versus how long this goes on for? All of the extras. If I was just like an ordinary person, I wouldn't care nearly as much. But Jesus, how it's very, very fucking annoying. Yeah.
Well, and the timing. I mean, I know this happened right after we met in person for the first time, and you were in New York to do like politics meet and greets, right? Like that was basically what was happening at that time. So that's not a ideal moment.
Yeah, fun times. Anyway, that's my complaining about everything. How's your life going, buddy?
I can't complain, man. Just got back from vacation. My brain's like only quasi-functional. So when you yell at me, hopefully it'll wake me up and get me back in lawyer mode.
All right. Where did you vacation to? Are you allowed to say, or you want to keep that secret?
I'll keep it general. I was in Europe. I visited some family. I did find out that when people say that like the public perception of America has decreased under Trump, they're not kidding. Like
Oh, damn.
people are very comfortable in Europe being like, "Oh, you're from America? Fuck Trump." Which, depending which side you're on, might be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. I think JD Vance would like that, but yeah, that was a
Sure.
little weird. That was definitely not the vibe in previous visits.
Yeah. Okay. You tweeted at me. We were what? What was it? What was this even over? What were we fighting over?
Yeah. So you were calling for like sweeping investigations into like Trump and his family and everybody he knows. And the comment I made was, "You're making the argument for sweeping pardons." And this is the thing that's been driving me crazy about this, because like Trump, he calls for investigations for all kinds of reasons that have almost nothing to do with the investigations. I think we could probably agree. But I think what we're getting into is this, like, I think it's going to be a really terrible norm. Like what Biden did will just become the new norm. Like when the president leaves office, he just pardons fucking everybody under the sun. Pardons his family, pardons his friends, pardons his associates, because we kind of normalize these investigations. And if you're leaving office, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you pardon everyone if you think that's a realistic risk? And I think that's a really bad state of affairs.
A minor correction or minor thing I would fight on there is I would say that if we're going to say that this type of behavior was normalized, I would say it was normalized in a far worse behavior on Trump's first term than on Biden's term. And I'll just say specifically with regards to the pardoning of Roger Stone.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, look, I think that like I'm not going to fight you about who started it. Like, I mean, Trump ran in 2016 on lock her up, right? Like, so clearly, like, investigations into political opponents have been part of his shtick from the beginning. I guess my concern is that when you enter in this age of political prosecutions being like the done thing, I don't think that works well. Like, I think it's really bad for institutional stability. It's really bad for rule of law. It's really bad for the state of our politics. And what frustrates me about it is that when I say that, I am totally willing to say Trump shouldn't do it either, right? Like I'm saying that it's a bad thing, and I catch endless shit from both sides on this. Like, I mean, Rob Noor lost his shit on me because I told him, like, I think political prosecutions are bad, and he's like, well, you gotta prosecute all the Democrats till they learn their lesson. And then I talked to somebody on the left, like, you gotta prosecute Trump till they learn their lesson. I'm like, I'm not sure you guys are seeing how this is going to play out. It looks like it's going to play out badly.
Yeah. Have you, are you familiar with The Prisoner's Dilemma?
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay. So for the audience, formalized version, I think of this as there are, I think it's 4 potential outcomes, or maybe 3, depending on how you look at it. So either you lock up 2 people in different rooms and they're interrogated. If both people cooperate with the cops and they turn each other in, then both of them are absolute losers. If neither of them cooperate with the cops, then neither of them get arrested, I think, and they both go free. And if one of them cooperates with the cops and the other person is super fucked, and the person who cooperates might get like immunity or something even better than having just walked. So it's like a weird world where, in a way, you're kind of incentivized to fuck over the other side. And if you can both cooperate, it would be better, but it's hard because you get more reward for fucking somebody over than cooperating, etc. I think that the issue that you run into with this, like, oh, we shouldn't lock up or prosecute or investigate Trump's family or anything else, is that Trump did this in, I would argue, an egregious way in his first term. And then we had the second term of Biden, where I would argue the egregiousness went in the other direction. I think that Garland should have been far more brutal in his pursuit of going after Donald Trump. And I think he massively failed there not doing that or not expediting those investigations or whatever. And then now we have Trump elected again, which seems to signal that the American people didn't care that much. And now Trump, I would argue, I think we could go through at least 3 or 4 different examples of the way that he's used the DOJ in ways that I would say are exceptionally bad through all of compared to anything else in U.S. history. And the idea of after this, what motivation would Democrats have to play by the rules, knowing that in the next admin, Republicans could theoretically just support the exact same thing again?
Yeah, so I think there's like there's different ways of looking at this. There's kind of a moral argument, or are you making a moral argument or a practical argument? Like you think it's like electorally better, or just morally they shouldn't?
I actually think you can make both. They're going to be different, but you can make both arguments. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because practically, what I guess, and taking the morals out of it for a second, I think the practical outcome of this is that you'll get presidents just pardoning everyone, right? And if your presidents are pardoning everyone, then you can't investigate because there's nothing to investigate. Everyone has a pardon. So maybe what you can do in that world is get people to testify, and because they have the pardon, they can't take the fifth. So maybe you can play that game where you say like, okay, like I'm going to call you before Congress. I'm going to ask you about this. You can't take the fifth. So, but then you still get presidential, executive privilege. It's not going to go that far. And I don't know, man. Like to me, when Biden pardoned everyone, I was like, okay, politically that's a disaster. Like obviously that's really bad for his party. As a father, like of course you pardon your kid. Like that he's going to get investigated. It's coming down the pipe. Why wouldn't you pardon your kid in that circumstance?
So I would fight on a couple things here. So one, whether it's good or bad politically, I'm not even sure how true that is. Again, apparently the American people just don't care. Two, I don't think he pardoned Hunter Biden just because he was his son. I think he pardoned Hunter Biden because of the relentless investigations that the conservatives had done, the fact that they turned up nothing, and the fact that the convictions that we got were worthless, highly politically motivated convictions. And then to the second point, in terms of like this is going to set a bad precedent, or people are just going to start pardoning everyone. I mean, Trump's kind of already done that. So, I talked to, you might even be one of them. I'm not sure. I'd go back to our debates and check. I talked to a lot of conservatives prior to Trump coming into office, and I asked, like, how would you feel if he would pardon every single J6er? And some would say, well, that probably wouldn't be good. Others would say, well, he should pardon all of them, but except maybe not the violent ones. And then now he just pardon everyone and no one cares and they all moved on. So like at that point, like practically, it seems like America doesn't give a fuck about it. It doesn't seem like it plays on a lot of Americans' minds. So why let the other side do it over and over and over again? And then you're just like fucked.
Yeah, well, I think that if you think that it's good for your political projects, that's one argument, right? Like you could say, like, I think the investigations will be helpful politically, and I'm not super concerned about presidents just pardoning their whole families and everyone they know when they leave office going forward, because I think we're already in that world. And if that's your position, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's a bummer, and I hope that that's not where we are. Like, I would like to get to a place where investigating the other side and people don't feel like they need to give these pardons at the end of their term in office. And I guess the only other caveat there is we might find out whether a president can self-pardon with immunity. That's less likely to be a thing, but it still could be a thing. So we might open that Pandora's box. But yeah, I mean, if that's where you are, then I can respect that. But I think that would be a real bummer.
I mean, I think that because Trump has done so many things individually that are all on their own, I think immediately disqualifying, honestly, of your right to life in a video game. But way past whatever legal norms there would be. Like Donald Trump pardoned, how many convictions were there on the seditious conspiracy? Was it 12? He pardoned people that were convicted of seditious conspiracy, and the seditious conspiracy had to do with putting Trump back in the White House. We're it's whatever it is. We're way past. We're not even talking norms at that point. We're talking chapter 2 of the start of the American Civil War 2.0 or whatever. That's just why, and that's not getting into all of the other insane political pardons. Whether we're talking Manafort, whether we're talking Flynn, whether we're talking Roger Stone, whether whatever else. Trump has pushed this beyond all reasoning, and I don't see where the political penalty is for any of this. If there's no political penalty, if you were a Democrat coming into office, why wouldn't you just say oh fuck, I guess it's just a new weapon that we have now to use against our political enemies?
And so I guess the thing I'm going to say is that that is a calmer version. It's the mirror image of the arguments Rob was making at me from the right about all the terrible things that the Democrats have done and all the reasons why there must be political prosecutions to teach them a lesson so that the American people can go forward. And he even conceded that he thinks it is a better world, if you could just be the czar of the universe, it's a better world if we don't have all these political prosecutions. But the only way to get it there in his mind is to go through the mud and to go through the process of dragging every Democrat before the House and bringing charges, all the congressional hearings and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree with Rob 100%. We just disagree on the facts.
Oh yeah. So I mean, but that's what I mean. I think that the reason why whenever I talk about this shit, I get like, you can tell when you're actually occupying a centrist position because you get just endless shit from both sides and nobody's your friend.
Well, like, do you think at this point, do you think that Kamala or Trump would have been better, at least insofar as rule of law is concerned in the United States?
My God. Oh my God. If we're gonna do this again. Oh, sorry, not again. I haven't done it with you. I did like fucking 10 hours on these hypos with Pisco. So this is
Sure. Well, so just to be sure, but we don't have to do it because you don't have a centrist position. You have the MAGA position on this, right? If you think that they're even remotely equivalent, like if you had to rank from 1 to 10 how bad Trump's rule of law violation has been, and then 1 to 10 how bad either Biden's was or how bad you think Kamala's would have been.
No, I think Trump's been. I think things have changed. We haven't spoken in a while. Like since we spoke, and I can't remember the exact date, but it was a while ago. Trump's administration's position on particularly freedom of speech, and also things have changed, but like to a lesser extent due process, but due process as well, and general rule of law has been quite bad. Like the facts got a lot worse. So
I wouldn't say quite bad. I would say the worst in all of American history. I think. I don't know if it's ever been this bad ever.
It kind of depends on how you view like rounding up people and putting them in camps, because American history has some dark chapters. But
there were better. We had better reasons to round up Japanese people and put them in camps during World War II than we did to say that we're at war with Venezuela, and that's why we have the Alien Enemies Act. I think the Japanese internment camps were more defensible than the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. Do you disagree with that?
Yes, because I think the Japanese internment camps were, and we have to get stats on this, but like my gut read of history is that they were sweeping in a way that is not comparable to what's happening here. Like that really was, you were just being rounded up on the basis of your nationality, and it was being done on a scale that dwarfs what's happening now. That's my understanding.
Well, the benefit of the Alien Enemies Act is it can be done on basis of nationality. Now, there were way more, I don't know if it was just Japanese, it might have been more all Asian citizens for some of the United States, but definitely Japanese. But like if you were a Venezuelan national, you can just be rounded up and deported, not put in a camp, but deported to CCOT as well, right? You're not even staying in the U.S. until this can be, figured out. You're getting deported to a crazy place in El Salvador, right?
This is the thing. The other thing that I've been pissing off MAGA people with when I pointed out recently is that, like, if you are someone who's pro deportations, and let's just assume for the sake of argument that's what we're talking about right now, like, so we can get past the policy for a second. Let's say that's your goal. This idea that you can deport people into prisons is super bad, is long term. It's super dangerous for even that goal, because the whole legal framework around why you can deport people is that it's not a penalty, so they don't need criminal levels of due process. That's why you can have like a quick hearing and then out you go. If you're sending someone to a camp or a prison, the Supreme Court is going to demand more due process. And they've been signaling this, that like they have some concerns about the due process aspects of this. So like long term, you're actually going to create the roadblock towards your own policy goal by doing this. Like it's
sure, that's fine, but I agree with you on that. But so like there was a better reason to intern Japanese citizens during World War II than there was to deport Venezuelans. Like we were actually at war with Japan. We're not at war with Venezuela, right? Do you agree that we're not at war with Venezuela? They're not invading us.
I think that's true. What the point I was making is that the number of Japanese citizens who were,
I understand the scale was larger, but I mean, ignoring scale,
and the number of people who were impacted who had no loyalty to the Japanese Empire was.
I understand the scale. The scale is one argument, sure, and we can talk about the scale. I guess that would be the only saving grace. But the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act here is completely unhinged, and then the deporting them to a foreign prison, not putting them in camp in the United States until we figure out what we're doing, but deporting them to a prison. I think it's worse. We can argue that the internment camps maybe were worse because of the scale of it, but we weren't deporting these people into torture camps. Well, and we at least had it was like World War II. It was arguably some kind of existential war for at least Europe.
I think we're glossing a pretty major detail. And again, this is I haven't looked at this history in a long time, but to my recollection, Japanese citizens, American citizens, were being put into camp on the basis of their ethnicity. So that's a little different than a non-citizen being deported. Yeah.
Wasn't it required to show some citizen trace for the World War II for the internment camps for the Japanese?
I don't want to go on a huge limb here. My recollection was that citizenship was not like a factor. I thought it was just nationality. If citizenship, if you could be a Japanese American citizen, and then you wouldn't go in the camp, that would be a good argument in favor of your position. But I think it was the other way around. I wouldn't, but I would need to look at it.
Okay. Even so, you had some tie to. I mean, it says Japanese and Japanese Americans, so second generation Japanese people, which would be American citizens.
Well, but I mean, okay, so that's a pretty big difference, right? Like, I mean,
it is a big difference, but it's still more defensible than saying that we're at war with Venezuela.
I think, like, for example, like if the policy of the Trump administration was to deport American citizens of Venezuelan descent, that would be an order of magnitude worse than what he's doing. Like, I think.
Well, but that's kind of so. But without the due process, which the Alien Enemies Act allows him to evade, I mean, that's kind of what he has the power to do now, right? It wasn't. Isn't that like
it doesn't allow him to do that. There are the Alien Enemies Act. Sorry, my kid's screaming in the background. If you can hear.
Yeah, you're good.
Whether or not there's an invasion or a war, there's these different predicates, and whether or not there are alien enemies, those are. Well, I have a bet with Pisco on this, but I'm pretty sure those are non-justiciable. I don't think we know for sure, but probably they're at his discretion. The due process part isn't. The Supreme Court, I think, has been pretty clear that the due process point, like if they're pressed on that, they're going to, that is an issue that the court can rule on. Did you provide adequate due process? Now, due process doesn't require a lot in this area. It could be a very quick hearing. It's not like a trial, right? But the courts are definitely not deferring to him on whether or not due process needs to be followed.
Sure, I'm not. It gets weird around the justiciable part. Is that the issue that they're fighting about right now in court? Because I think I don't remember if because if you say the initial invocation is non-justiciable, you get into really weird areas about that. Regardless of where they fall on the legality for the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, I feel like if you look at the situation of the scenario and everything going on, like I'm not going to defend internment camps or whatever for Japanese in World War II, but like there is a understandable world where somebody would do that isn't just purely motivated by racial fucking hatred, that doesn't involve like an outright fucking lie. We were, at least my understanding is we were at war, a relatively existential war with Japan in World War II. We're not at war with Venezuela. We're not being invaded by Venezuela. The invocation of that act, and we're not using this to just arrest people and round them up or deport them. We're using it to deport them into like prisons in El Salvador. Whether the concentration camps, or they torture people there or not. I mean, we can argue about it. I mean, it seems like most people agree that is the case for Sigat. That just seems insane to me. And also, like, even if we were to go back and forth on this and slightly disagree, the fact that this argument started because I said I think that Trump has done with this some of the worst stuff in all of U.S. history, and the argument we're having right now is, well, was it worse than one of the worst things arguably that we've done with civil rights in U.S. history, which is the internment of Japanese in World War II?
We're totally autism broing like a really minor point, like just kind of for fun. I don't think there's an argument that Trump has been like good on rule of law. He's been terrible on rule of law.
I'm not arguing that he's been good on rule of law. I'm arguing that he's one of the worst in U.S. history.
I just said he was terrible. If my superlatives aren't good enough for you, I don't know what to say. But like,
okay, well, I only say that because like all the Joe Biden stuff is brought up in the same breath, or like that Kamala would have been worse, or like equivalent, and I don't think it's even remotely the same. So that's why I asked you, like, do you think that Kamala would have been worse for rule of law than Trump? And I don't know in what world we're even remotely equivalent here if we agree that Trump is doing some of the worst stuff ever. Like, what do you think Kamala or Biden would have done that would have been remotely similar?
But we got into this on the subject of like, how does this play out? Right? Like what happens when these investigations become the norm, when we start we start every presidency, the next guy gets into office, orders the DOJ to investigate his predecessor, investigate his family. You get Trump posting on Truth Social to investigate Obama now. Like in that world, I think, we're really, really degrading the rule of law. I think we agree on this, right? It's a very bad world to be in, and I would like to get out of that world. Now, you and Rob Noor apparently agree on the only way out is through. I'd like there to be some other option. Like maybe people are like, at some point, this is his last term. We say, okay, we're done with him. Can we find some other norm going forward that's not going to be so batshit crazy? Because this shit, I don't think is going to work. I think this is really destructive. If people, who grew up in this, grew up and said, yeah, American criminal law is kind of bullshit. The federal government just investigates people politically. I wouldn't be mad about them saying that. I'd say, oh, we can do so much better. But like, holy shit, like it does seem like that is what we do now. And that's a shitty place to be. And I am very interested in getting out of this mess. Maybe this is, in your mind, the best way through. I don't know. But
the thing is that like we have to agree on some factual reality to escape it. And if we think that both parties have been even remotely similar, like that's just never going to happen. Like this is the end. I would argue that Trump's lawfare in his first term was already grossly unacceptable. I would argue that Biden in his second term, despite trying to be the come together and be the president for all Americans man, still gets lambasted as being about as bad as Trump. And now that we're in Trump's second term, I would argue that we've seen the worst that we have seen in all of U.S. history in several different ways. And now we're like, after this, like, okay, well, hopefully after this, things can go back to normal. Like as a Democrat, and at this point, I would vote for the unhinged shit. I'm going to be honest, this is very personal, okay? I actually came 15 times last night when I saw that tweet that Gavin Newsom was going to gerrymander the fuck out of every conservative out of California. I actually sat in my fucking bathroom and I fucking jerked my cock for 15 orgasms when I saw that. So I was so fucking happy that there is somebody in this country that wants to put Republicans on the same playing field. The fact that we had the Gore shit with Bush and that election tossed, the fact that we had a lost Supreme Court pick under Obama, and then that is whatever. And then the insanity that was, there were two different special counsels under Biden investigating him and his son at the same time, where when Trump came in office to kill the investigation on him and his people around him and then pardon all of them after their convictions, to have another term of Trump where we've seen, and we walk through any number of these insanity. And then it's like, wow, I hope the Democrats take us back to normalcy. I'm like, nah, I hope that at least like the methods of whatever capital punishment are at least fun to watch on TV. Like, I don't understand why anybody who's a quote unquote centrist or Republican would ever expect any Democrat to come back and be like, okay, well, let's play by the rules now. Because I wouldn't expect any Republicans to. Why would I have any reason to? They haven't paid any consequences. None of them have suffered at all for any of the insanity over the past like 25 years. Like most of the Republicans still think the 2020 election was stolen. Like how do you come back in that world?
Well, I mean, they're not going to suffer, right? Like, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, he's going to pardon everybody. So you're not going to get any of these people in an investigation. Like, it's just not going to happen. But, and I think that, and this plays a little bit into your like Hutch, Pisco, Econoboy thing. Shout out, I'm going to be debating Econoboy on whether socialism is immoral next week. Our schedules don't line up, so I'm trying to find the time, but we'll do that. That should be fun. But when I look at the political landscape, and you can tell me if you disagree, I think Trump's superpower, after all this time, and there's a few things he's very good at politically, but his true superpower is that he found a way to get the unhinged portion of the right to vote and to vote for him. Like the QAnon crowd. Like, I mean, these are not people who were voting previously, right? They are the mirror image of the crazy tanky socialists on the left-hand side, of the spectrum who never vote Democrat. And he found a way to mobilize them. As long as that vote's in play, unhinged behavior is going to get rewarded. I don't know what else to say, because like that vote likes some unhinged shit. Just like, honestly, like if, Hassan's crowd fucking voted, they'd love some unhinged shit too. Like that's just who these people are. If that crowd stops voting, like they used to not vote when Trump's no longer in the picture, like they didn't really vote when he wasn't on the ballot, like in midterms and shit, that might be a path to normalcy. Because I think the new thing in American politics is that they're voting. I don't think that ever happened before.
So the issue is that the unhinged portion of the right that's voting for Trump is basically 95% of the Republican Party. Trump has, within the Republican Party, some of the highest approval ratings of any president in history, despite the fact that he has some of the lowest overall approval ratings, the lowest overall approval ratings, the second lowest. The first lowest was him in his first term right now. That something is fundamentally broken there, and I think it's a mistake to view it as just Trump. I think that McConnell saying that they were going to force Obama to be a one-term president, I think that McConnell refusing to even have a Senate hearing for Merrick Garland as an Obama Supreme Court pick, despite the election being a year away. I think the Ken Starr 5-year obsessive investigation into Bill Clinton to try to find some reason to get him impeached or thrown out of office. I think that the Supreme Court ruling in Florida that forced Gore to resign that election before truly they had the recount they deserved. I think all of these things and the lack of consequences that conservatives have ever paid for anything. If I was a random person and I ventured into American media and I thought about the U.S. budget, I would think, man, Democrats are fucking spenders, and Republicans come in and they really rein, or they try to get the reins, I guess, at least on the spending. That's one thing I can say about conservatives. And then if I were to tell them, the last budget surplus we had was under a Democratic president, that most of the spending actually happens under Republican presidents. Like nothing is real to any of the conservatives. They don't have. How do they even have the reputation of being fiscally conservative? Like Donald Trump right now, we just had our big beautiful budget. He's trying to pressure the Fed to lower the interest rates. Like nothing is real, and when there's no shared reality, I don't know what Would you truly expect if a Democrat gets elected next time to try to go back to normalcy when you've got subhuman, degenerate, hellspawn demons like Jim Jordan and Comer and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mike Johnson and all these actual satanic figures still crawling around the House and in Congress? I just don't know how you would ever expect that to happen.
Well, I mean, if we're going to be in the everyone's a satanic figure land, it certainly won't. I think that
they are satanic figures. They are satanic figures. This is the issue that I run into. I think you don't think it's that bad.
No, I think that politicians, by and large, are immoral and like to win. And the right has coalesced around what is winning. The question I was posing is that working because it's the new normal? And if it is the new normal, by the way, then you're probably right about all the stuff you've been saying. Like, if that's the new normal going forward, then there's no reason that I could give why Democrats should attempt to do sane, old school, respect the institutions, respect the office type behavior. But if that stuff starts fading when Trump is no longer there to, galvanize the base, then there would be a way forward. And so I'm maybe overly optimistic, but I'm fingers crossing that that's what it is, because if we go down the road you're suggesting, I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. And I'm hoping that there's some way that we can avoid that.
We're already way down that road. That's the issue. If I think of just the Eric Adams scheme, is there a single thing that Biden in his 4 years did just on that, even cumulatively to the Eric Adams thing?
Or you can pick so many. Trump's crypto thing.
No. I'm saying. I know. Hold on. I know you're on the Trump side. I'm asking in terms of Trump and the Eric Adams scheme. Is there one thing that Biden did?
I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying you could pick the Trump crypto thing, and you say what's the second most corrupt thing after that? And you'd be like, well, Teapot.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that because we keep saying that both sides, you said, politicians are immoral and like to win, and I'm saying that no, I'm saying that MAGA and the conservatives are very special outside in their own world right now. None of this was normal or normalized prior to.
I think that what I'm saying there is that I think there's a difference between someone like Trump, or maybe I don't know who you want to pick as your chief satanic figure, Marjorie Taylor Greene, maybe, I don't know, a true believer. And then there's somebody like a Mitch McConnell who, I don't think he likes Trump. I don't think he's particularly enamored with Trump. I think he likes winning. I think that he's willing to ride the winning horse, even if it's kind of gross, and I think that the opportunistic politicians will change course if the wind changes. The true believers won't. But I guess my assessment is different than yours. I don't think the true believers are 95% of the base. I think that I think that they are part of his base and a big part of his base. But I don't know I don't know.
Sure, but then if you agree on the scale, when I ask who's worse for rule of law, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, what are you possibly considering in your mind to make these two even remotely equivalent?
I didn't say they were equivalent.
But it sounded like there was a heavy consideration there. Would you agree that Kamala Harris would have been immensely and supremely better?
I was trying to decide if I wanted to pivot into the giant debates that Pisco had and I had on some of these topics, and I opted not to. There are certain things that the Democrats were doing that I thought were really bad and caused them to lose. And in that moment they deserve to lose. I certainly think the Trump administration has done some terrible, terrible things, and hopefully they will lose as a result. Like this is
When you
not,
think of like things that the Democrats did, what is the single most worst horrible thing you can think of over the past 10 years with regards to like rule of law stuff that you think the Democrats did?
Oh no, that's why I didn't pivot to it, because it's not going to be the same thing. It's like I think that the Democrats were on the verge of attempting to make racial preferences legal in a lot of places, which I thought was pretty gross. I thought that the cover of Biden's health and whatever was happening in the last
Biden's health not relevant to rule of law, and Trump's health is currently being covered up by the entire Republican establishment as well, right?
I said I at the beginning.
Well, sure.
said
So
this is not a
I understand.
law point, which is why
I'm just trying to understand. Sure. I'm just trying to understand when we say Kamala could have been worse for rule of law, overall, just broadly speaking, than Trump.
I didn't say that. What I said was you asked the question, and I paused because I was trying to figure out whether I wanted to pivot into these other problems I had with her, and I chose not to. I agree with you that Trump's worse on rule of law. Like I don't disagree. Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, so I was curious about.
I know you're prepping for your debate, so we got you like it's you got to like get in there, but.
I'm not prepping for a debate. The issue that I have is that the constant downplaying of like everything that Donald Trump does, it actually drives me fucking insane. I feel like there's at least 5 or 10 different things that like on their own are worse cumulatively than all the horrible legal stuff that you complain about Democrats for fucking ever. Yeah, the executive orders targeting law firms, I think, is insane. The targeting of individuals to have like their security clearances revoked because they don't politically like them is unbelievable. Yeah. The entire Bovee and Bondi scheme to manipulate Eric Adams as mayor by dangling charges over him, I thought was absolutely unreal. The invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, I thought was an egregious violation of rule of law. The fact that we've got this unitary executive theory running where Pam Bondi serves as Trump's right-hand prosecutor that he personally directs, I think is insane. The fact that we put a special prosecutor in place to investigate Biden because he found a folder of potentially classified information in his garage, and now we have this huge conflict of interest related to Pam Bondi, Epstein, and the FBI redacting Trump's names for him. We don't have a special prosecutor for that. I think it's crazy. Like there's like so many different things we could go on. Sorry, I'm like but then when I hear people talk about it, like, well, Kamala could have been bad. I think Trump's kind of bad. I don't know. What would it be? And it's like, well, maybe Kamala could have extended some DEI stuff. It's like, well, affirmative action ended under Biden and they didn't do anything to bring it back. Like, I don't even know how it's even remotely close. And then when we have the conversation of, when we have the conversation of like, what do we do going forward? Well, the Democrats just have to move past it. And it's like, holy fuck. Like, what are we talking about? Like, what?
You said like a billion things there. I'm not going to try to respond to all of them because
that's fine. You can also cut me off. I'm rambling too much. But go for it.
A few things. One, just because it's like a thing that I've talked about publicly, so I just feel I have to say, affirmative action ended under Biden with Biden arguing before the Supreme Court that it should continue. It ended over his objection. And when Trump was in office, he was arguing it should end. So I don't think that's a really fair point. But I mean, I'm only picking one because you said it. There's a billion things you said, and I'm not going to attempt to,
Sure. Well, but that's following rule of law. It ended. Obviously, there's still litigants going to fight it for it, but it ended, and they lost, and they moved on. Yeah. Right.
But in fairness, when you like one of the questions that I think is very interesting to ask is, I agree with you about so much about the stuff that Trump does that's bad. So much of the things that you say, I'm just like, yeah, I think that is very bad, and that's the sort of even our first conversation, I said, like, my concerns about the rule of law with Trump are why I didn't vote for him. Like, that was the reason that not to vote for him. So it's a bummer that it's played out this way, but it's not terribly surprising, I don't think. The question is, why are Democrats the only thing less popular than Republicans? Like, what? Like, with all that you've just said, why is it the Democrats are so unpopular? And it seems like the answer is because they don't fight hard enough. But I wonder if the answer is that there's this obsession with symmetry. There's an idea that like the sides are going to be held to the same standard, and I think that might be a little utopian. I don't think that's how it works.
Yeah, but I think one of the reasons why, there's a lot of things. One, I think, is the just massive misinformation apparatus that the Republicans control from top to bottom. Today, Trump literally fired his Labor Department secretary because he, not the top secretary or whatever, but because he didn't like the jobs numbers that they reported. So the fact that Republicans have like this absolute top-down media control is I think, a huge thing. And the second thing is you say like, well, they don't feel like they'll fight for them. like that's true, but like our standard for fighting is like, do I have a president who believes so strongly in his ability to lead the country that he's willing to like lead a fucking insurrection to stay in office and then lie about the results of the election indefinitely? Donald Trump today, the leader of the United States of America, supposedly the leading shining beacon democracy, currently has a president who believed that the last election was rigged, and that's never going to change. Like there are going to be, I'm trying to say mean words. There are conservatives going forward who are going to teach for the rest of their lives, their children and their grandchildren and their great-great-grandchildren, if they live that long, they're going to be teaching them that the 2020 election was probably stole. That's inconceivable to me. That's like, so of course they feel like they can fight strongly. They literally are willing to fight as dirty as possible to do whatever they want.
Well, but there's also, and I don't claim to have an answer to this, but the base on the right at present just seems to be cohesive in a different way. Like, when I think about, like, okay, in terms of their politics, who's an equivalent to Hassan on the right? Like, who's a right-leaning Hassan in terms of, like, how far they are from the center?
In terms of how far they are from the center, Matt Walsh, I guess. I don't know. Like Charlie Kirk, maybe. I don't know. It depends on what you mean.
Charlie Kirk, right? Like, I mean, you get like, you get the Christian nationalists, you get like the hardcore populists, but they all voted Republican. Right? On the left is not cohesive in that way. So I think when we start playing these games of like zero sum, as presently constituted, that favors the right because their base is cohesive in a way that the left isn't, and the left fragments on these various wedge issues, Israel, Palestine, whatever it'll be something else next time, right? Like I don't think that battlefield favors the left, if I'm giving my honest assessment. I think the left wins when they are inspirational, when they are practical, when they sound like prime Obama, prime Bill Clinton. I think that's the blueprint that has been successful because their base is such a big tent and it has so many different ideas that the only way when you're down in the mud, it doesn't inspire and it doesn't bring the people in. I think the left just operates differently than the right. And I think that asymmetry is going to be a battlefield that really favors the right. I think in this kind of like dirty, meme, edgy content, the right has a huge structural advantage. I think it just is a better area for them to play.
I don't think I actually even agree with that right now. I think that the right actually has a bigger tent than the left because the right, because of the complete homogeneity of media messaging control that they have from top to bottom. Like we can say the left has a big tent, but the right literally got the fucking, I would have bet so much money against this ever happening. The right fucking got the Silicon Valley dipshits to actually play into and all the crypto bros and everything who are watching Donald Trump support crypto, who has no idea, what a blockchain even is. I feel like the right incorporated a ton of new people. You saw a lot of the, Hispanic vote in Miami and Florida start to sway more conservative than they thought they had. You saw young people, even young men, kind of sway a lot more conservative than they thought they could.
I mean,
but I think,
I mean, you just said the fucking magic word, right? Like, I mean, that in terms of like the massive self-owns on the left, the way that they've lost the young male vote is like an unbelievable self-own. Like that was.
It's not a self-own though. It's an own insofar as the Republicans control the media apparatus and can demonstrate and do whatever message that they want. That's insane to me. It's crazy because
that the messaging in, and I'm not saying this is like the politicians necessarily, but if you look at like the messaging within like the left media sphere for the past 10 years, there was an article that came out recently that said something like, girls are now achieving more than boys in every area in academia except one. And here's why that's a problem. That was essentially the title. And it's like, whoa, holy shit. You just said that other than math, girls are outperforming boys in every other subject. And it's a problem that they're not outperforming them in math. That's the fucking article. And in a world where that's like, the mainstream leaning opinion in left-leaning circles getting published in publications, yeah, you're going to have a male vote problem. Like, I mean, this isn't fucking rocket science. If you think David Hodge is going to solve your fucking male vote problem, you've lost your mind. And then they kicked him out for a gender quota, which is hilarious because it wasn't even it was a gender quota that required a man. So it wasn't even like a good reason to kick him out. But they thought a gender quota would be like a good way to kick someone out, that would be a palatable way to kick people out. There's an undercurrent on the left that really does believe that we should still be in this world of de facto or in fact quotas based on race and gender to ameliorate historic wrongs, and it pisses people off, and it lost them a ton of male support, and it's not a fucking mystery. They did this to themselves. So yeah, that's a cell phone. But also fixable. Like, that's totally fixable. That is something they could just change. I don't think they are, but they could.
Okay. Sorry, I was thinking of different ways to kill myself. Okay. This is an issue that I run into every single time. I've had this on Piers Morgan. I've had this every single centrist, every single conservative I've talked to. Every single time I run into this issue, okay, I have this thing where it's like, I think that Republicans are disgusting. It's like, why? I think that the statements that Comer has made in front of Congress, I think that the position that Jim Jordan occupies on all these panels in the House of the relentless investigation, I think all the things that Donald Trump, Bondi and Bovee, fucking Dumb and Dumber, the Kash Patel and Bongino, there's back and forth, the Epstein files. I think that the insanity that fucking Huckabee's wild fucking statements and texts to Trump related to fucking Israel, like all of these people that are cabinet, RFK Jr. And the insanity that's been going on with the Health and Human Services Department, all of these insane things going on. And it's like, okay, fair point. But did you see this article that was a huge like L about men and women in school? And it's like, how am I possibly, like, I'm fucked at that point. If I can point to, like, if we want to say that political parties taking positions on things should cause them to lose or gain votes, like, how the fuck is it that the party that supported Andrew Tate has any women that vote for them at all, right? Like, the idea that like the left can lose votes on every single article and every single tweet and every single random social media post, I don't believe that. I think that what we're talking about, I think the only reason you even know that article exists is because some conservative tweeted it, and because Charlie Kirk retweeted it, and because Steve Bannon and Nick Fuentes and then Donald Trump and then Candace Owens and every other person like cycles his stuff. And then you're in this world, it's like, okay, well, Donald Trump might have said this bad thing, but holy shit, I saw this article at The Atlantic, and they said over there that like boys and girls might be gender identity confused, and now I'm not really sure who I should vote for. And then it's like, you look at like the average Democrat, like you look at the average like center-left Democrat, like most center-left Democrats don't give a fuck about any of these issues. You're going to like the most extreme, like people posting articles in the media and stuff, and like it's not even a majority position of anybody in the party. And somehow the Democrats, it's fair that the Democrats have to answer for that. Well, the Republicans seem to elude any responsibility for the Republican side. I don't know. That's just mind-blowing to me.
I mean, I think in your quest for symmetry, you're like missing the most fundamental point here, which is that, you know, like I said to you now a few times in a few different places that one of my concerns was that the left seemed to be in favor of discriminating against my children in various ways. Now, there's a lot of stuff you brought up I agree with. There's a lot of stuff that I really don't like about Trump. And in fact, you know, I don't know if you recall this, but I've never even voted for a Republican. I voted left my entire life, right? I just sat out the last election. So like, I am a gettable vote. The problem is when I say like, this is a self-own, what I'm trying to do is be helpful. Right? I'm honestly saying, like, I think the left needs to do some soul searching on this issue. Like they need to do some soul searching about what the fuck to do about the crazy tanky wing. Like
so what is the soul searching that like no more crazy people can write articles? Or I don't understand the soul searching. Like Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens, I don't think either of these people believe we went to the moon. And there's semi-prominent voices on the right. Like, what is the soul? And when the left has the soul search?
I think the left needs to start being clear about what it's for and what it's against. And I think that, like, you know.
But the right isn't clear about what they're for against. Is that the asymmetry?
The asymmetry is not going to be. Isn't going to fucking matter, because what I'm saying is that the thing that was concerning to me about this policy is intensely personal, because I have young children who would be discriminated against in a world of affirmative action. So I would prefer them not to be in that world because they're my kids. And
do you think, hold on, wait, do you think, were you more worried about, or God, sorry, God.
You can bring up a billion fucking things, right? But like the pitch that Republicans were making last election was that it was, holy shit, this seems unfair. This seems crazy. Doesn't that seem crazy to you? And it was a pretty good pitch. It worked. But a lot of that stuff is fixable. It's just not a thing the Democrats have to do. It's a policy choice.
Do you think that affirmative action represented a greater threat to your kids than the totality of or the direction of the current like Republican, I guess, like regime?
My kids, particularly?
Sure, yeah.
Yes, but that's because I'm incredibly privileged in my profession, and there are a lot of the stuff that you would bring up has no impact on me. So you
think in your life you were legitimately worried that your kids' futures were going to be fucked because of affirmative action?
I think that in a world where it is legal and acceptable and a thing that people are doing and celebrating to have policies that are discriminatory on the basis of race, on the basis of gender, and always in the same direction, that worries me for my kids who would then be impacted by those policies. Like what?
So you think that you genuinely believe there's like a thing that's like the present, like the forefront of your mind. You thought that there's a good chance, there's a decent chance, not like a 0.001%, but there's a decent chance that your kids are going to be severely negatively impacted by affirmative action going forward if Democrats would have had their way, I guess.
Did you follow the affirmative action case?
The one with Harvard and the
Harvard?
stuff, right?
I mean, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on it, but like,
Go ahead.
God, I'm trying to get my memory right. In the First Circuit, the Trump administration appeared and said, hey, court, look at this data. We think this is de facto discrimination. This is a very bad thing that's happening, right? And then administration changes. It goes to the Supreme Court. Biden's lawyers show up and say, we've looked at the data. We've changed our position. We're cool with this now, right? So, and like, look, there's a deep argument you can make about whether the data was good enough or bad enough, and that's an interesting thing, but it's kind of in the weeds. But that's a pretty serious change in position. Similarly, like in NASDAQ, there was a rule that they were pushing forward in NASDAQ that was going to have board membership have to have quotas based on diversity. And it was chugging along until Trump won, and then they withdrew it. I think it was in the Fifth Circuit and being appealed, and they withdrew because they knew that when they went to the Supreme Court, Trump's lawyers were going to be on the other side. So yeah, in this area, the Trump administration made a big impact. And there's other areas where they've done helpful things, though I will share your frustration that they often do it for like the most batshit fucking reason. Like the example I give is when Robert Kennedy came out, he said, we should ban cell phones in school. And I was like, yes, we should. That's a great move. And then he's like, because they're fucking magic radio waves that'll cause cancer in your brain. You're like, well, that's not the reason why we should ban them. That's insane. But it's a good policy. It's just for the fucking wrong reason. So it's not like there aren't things about the Trump administration that I think are good things. There's stuff that's been good. He's just done a lot of fucking awful shit too.
Sure, tell me if you disagree with either of these two statements, then the thing that follows, okay? And I don't know your life, I don't know you personally, but my understanding is affirmative action helped the most white women, and it hurt the most probably Asian men. Now that affirmative action is supposedly gone in some way, that means it's probably going to help Asian men more than anything else, because now they don't have to, I guess, fight against the same high SAT score requirements to go to school, and then all the benefits from white women are not going to be as present. So unless like all of your kids are Chinese boys, am I missing something? Like, does the revoking of affirmative action even help your children at all?
It definitely was not white women to my understanding, at least from the data that was presented in that court case. But I mean, if you have something else you want me to look at, I'm happy to. But even if that was true, and like I said, that's not the numbers that I've seen. But even if that were true, to give a preview of the argument I'm going to make, when I talk to a convoy about socialism, there are also just certain things that are wrong. Like I am not in favor of discriminating on the basis of race. It's not a thing that I think should be legal. And I don't think it should be legal if your reasons are considered good. Just like I don't think that we should remove all property rights from people in America because socialism might have some kind of positive impact on the quality of life. I think there are actually these baseline rights that matter, which is why when Trump shits on the fucking First Amendment, and I apologize, I know you brought up the law firm thing. Pisco made this point, and he's right. It's a little delicate. for me to talk about that, so I'm trying to skirt that a little bit more than I did in the past, just because I probably shouldn't talk about it as much as I was willing to. But like, there are certain things that are just worth defending and worth being upset about. The direction the Democrats were taking was violating these kind of core rights and norms. I did think in a way that could hurt my kids, and in a way that just is unacceptable. Now,
Just curious, just
that
a random
mean
thing.
that the Trump administration isn't violating these fucking norms, and I hope he loses for it. Like,
Okay, sure. I'm just curious. Have you ever uttered that statement when Biden was in office, that there's a thing that you probably don't feel safe or comfortable talking about anymore because it'd have a direct negative real world impact on you from the administration?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, sorry. From the administration, the comma changed it. Sorry. From the administration, no, but that's not exactly why I don't want to talk about the law firm thing. It's just that that's my world. I know these people. My comments should probably not be public on that. But yeah, like, I mean, I think during like 2020 to 2024, for example, I would not have and did not go on shows like this to talk publicly about politics because I thought it would be very, very risky career-wise. Like, so, I mean, that's not from the administration. So that's why I changed it when you added that. But yeah, I felt very constrained in my behavior during the Biden years.
Even though the height of all of the censorship and everything online was under Trump, and it all kind of receded under Biden. Do you acknowledge that?
Well, I think that there's the kind of censorship that I'm worried about. And this is why I said you pointed out that like by the administration was such a central point. Was in the world that I occupied, it was there was complete groupthink on politics. Like in 2016 when Trump won, and I won't say where I was working. Like it was like a day of mourning. Everybody, like people left work, like people like didn't come back for like the rest of the week. Like it was understood that everybody was supposed to be upset except for like the 2% known conservative. Like there was a total uniformity of politics. Flash forward today, nobody where I work talks about politics because it's understood that there's people with different positions. And that norm is a lot better. Now, I don't know if that's because I changed where I work or just the world changed, but certainly where I was working circa, 2020, 2024, it was, there was a strong norm that if you were not espousing a strongly left-leaning view, you should probably shut up about politics. And, that I did. And I have a lot of left-leaning views, so I was happy to talk about those. But my more like right-leaning or centrist views, I should certainly shut the fuck up about. But that's not because of the administration. That's because of the culture of political uniformity and censorship that was prevalent at that time, at least in my experience.
Okay. I don't know where you want to go from here. The thing that I like, I don't know what to, I'm not sure. I just don't know. I'm so mind fucked on everything related to this. I feel like Trump could start executing people in the street, and you would be talking to me about theoretical affirmative action that might hurt your kids in the future or something. Like I just don't understand. Like Donald Trump is, like, to mention the First Amendment, Donald Trump is suing pollsters, he's suing media companies, and he's suing social media companies for kicking him off of like Facebook and Twitter and everything else, and he's like targeting individual lawyers and targeting law firms, and is now suing the Wall Street Journal because he doesn't like that they public Has there ever in U.S. history been another president that has filed a civil suit while in office or out of office against any a media company? Has that ever happened before? Just that thing alone?
You left out, I think, the worst First Amendment stuff, which is the I forgot her name, the woman who they attempted to deport just for writing an op-ed. Like it was the purest freedom of speech link to deportation you could imagine. And then in the Harvard one, where they asked for surveillance footages of all the protests going back like 5 years. Like, I mean, that's actual, like, when you become Big Brother and you ask for the surveillance footage of the students, that's not a great look from the First Amendment perspective. So, I mean, I agree with you on all this. Like, and will be delighted when the Trump term is over, to be clear. That's a different question than did I think Harris deserved to lose? I thought she did deserve to lose. But that, I mean, that doesn't mean that his term has earned more rewards going forward. That's a different question.
So do you think that overall Harris would have been worse than like the cumulative effects of Trump just under the first like barely year of his office?
I think she did. Well, that's a tough question.
You said Harris deserved. Why didn't Trump deserve to lose more?
I thought Trump was disqualified because of his, insane position on the rule of law, which has played out, and that's why I didn't vote for him. I thought that Harris was a few things that deeply troubled me. We already talked about like the affirmative action stuff, so I don't want to dwell on that, but copy paste all that shit back in here. And then also, I thought that she was I never liked her. Like, I didn't like her as a VP pick. There was no point that I think she was a good pick. But then the way she was anointed and the way that Biden's health was covered up gave me, and I think a lot of people, the strong impression that we were essentially voting for the DNC presidency. We were voting for the establishment presidency, not a vigorous executive with their own views. We were voting literally for the machine that had just lied to us about Biden's health to our face for quite a long time in a concerning way. I don't know if that bothered you or not. Like when the Her report came out and I read that for the first time, I thought that was political poison. I was like, oh my God, there's no way he recovers from this. I thought it was like the worst thing that could happen until I saw the debate performance, which confirmed everything in it. And that's a crazy thing to lie about. And it really highlighted why her pick was such a bad pick, because we had a president who probably at some point needed to be tapped out. And you really, when you are picking an older president, you want a vice president who's ready to step in. That should.
Do you think that Donald Trump is senile right now?
No. I think he's getting older, so I'm sure it's going to get.
What would it take? What could possibly happen that would convince you that Donald Trump is senile, besides him talking slower?
I mean, are you trying to draw a comparison between Trump and that debate performance?
I think that if my life was on the line, I think I could easily argue that Trump is more senile or shows more cognitive deficit than Biden did in the end of his presidency. I think it's the easiest argument in the world. So I'm curious, what would you have to see for Trump to think that that's true?
How about this? I'll give you exactly the things that convinced me for Biden.
There was
an
for Trump.
investigative report that pointed out that he was too old, too infirm, and too mentally incompetent to be charged, followed by going on stage and saying that he's going to defeat Medicare. And having
Hold on. Wait. Okay, wait. One thing at a time. So one, you acknowledge we will never get a special counsel investigation into Trump under his presidency, right? That will never happen.
Sure, we're talking about hypotheticals, right? Like
but I'm hypothetically, right?
Like real practical.
I'm saying that the insight that you got from her to Trump, or I'm sorry, from her for Biden, you will never get that level of investigation into Trump while he's in office, right? We agree on that?
Probably not.
Okay. Number two, you acknowledge that the medical doctor that released reports on him, he lies about Trump's health conditions. Maybe not mentally, but at the very least, we now know physically, right? He's got this chronic vein problem that makes his cankles fucking explode, and he lied probably about like Trump's weight and everything else, right? So we acknowledge the health reports about his physical health are lying at least, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
I think that. Yeah. I also don't. I mean, I don't know if he's 6'4" or not, right? Like, there's
sure.
He's probably he seems heavier than his reports indicate as well.
Sure. For the Her report, okay, that didn't say that he was so mentally incompetent that he couldn't be charged with a crime, okay? What the Her report said was that Biden didn't have the mens rea of trying to intentionally obscure or hide classified information or whatever, but that he might not have recalled if a particular thing was classified. That's what the Her report said, because I've read like the section that you're talking about that people quote as saying, he said he was so senile he couldn't be sure of the crime. He didn't. What Her said was like Biden probably didn't remember or have the recollection of this thing in particular to have the mens rea to charge him with a particular crime. Her report did not say he was so senile they couldn't charge him with crimes. So that's not true.
I haven't read this. I haven't read it recently. I don't know if you have. If you want to pull it up, we could. But
I went over this because Peace Collector bring it up a lot, and I went through and I did read this section. And that's not what Her said, but we can put that aside. It's not being an important thing. But
when I read it, and this is a public document, so viewers can just go look at it. When I read it, I certainly got the impression that Her was saying there are things that are chargeable. I am choosing not to charge them because of his mental condition. That was my takeaway from that section. So, I mean, if you want, we can read it, or viewers can read it. But then also, that was then confirmed publicly, like by the debate performance, right? So it's not like it was. It's not like
No, the debate performance confirmed that he absolutely was slow as fuck in an actual back and forth debate. I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
But in terms of confirming Cinelli, okay, so her report. So we know that we know we're never going to get a special counsel investigation into Trump on it.
Do you think in the last year he was vigorously running the country? Like, do you think he was
More than Trump? Yes, absolutely, easily, yeah, 100%.
Okay, I mean that.
So walking through again. So we're past. We know that the medical people lie about his physical condition. Okay, and we know we're never going to get a special counsel investigation to super sit there and grill Trump and everything. So what other types of evidence?
Was paralyzed.
What?
Right? FDR couldn't walk. FDR couldn't walk.
Yeah, but we knew that he was in a wheelchair,
well, no,
right?
But they didn't know it at the time. That was actually concealed from the public for a long time. I mean, presidents, like their physical health, that is kind of like a long, though not great tradition. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I was being a dick. Go ahead.
Okay. So what other things would you need to see from Trump to say like, okay, fuck, maybe this guy might be kind of losing it?
I mean, the thing that's tricky about Trump and evaluating this is that when he's like if you compared the way he spoke in like 2016 to now, he kind of always speaks in this bizarre rambling style where, you know, like what do you call on the Joe Rogan show, like the weave, whatever he calls it, which I will concede makes it really hard to evaluate his mental state.
We do see that he's like mixing names up. He's getting countries wrong. He's getting dates wrong. When he was talking to Zelensky, he said they were invaded in 2015, not 2014. We saw him refer to, didn't he say like Sudan or something was part of BRICS, or Spain was part of BRICS instead of South Africa? We seen him do that wrong. He forgot that he was the one who hired, it wasn't his labor secretary. It was, Jerome Powell, that he forgot that he appointed him to the Federal Reserve, right?
I mean, bro literally tried to guess the cure for COVID on live TV once.
Sure, but these are things he's forgetting. I'm just saying that is there any...
that we nuke a hurricane and fucking... I mean, this is the problem. It's like...
I understand. Well, there's not a problem, but I'm saying this is why I was saying before, right? You're telling me that, well, no, there was more evidence that you could say that Biden was senile because Trump has always been a fucking lunatic, crazy person whose mental state is indecipherable because of his ordinary behavior.
No. This is like one of the things about Trump that I find most maddening is like I've just come to terms with the fact I have a very, very hard time reading him. I don't think I know why he's doing the things he's doing. Do you also agree that it doesn't seem like he's like running stuff? So for instance, I'm curious, in the Signal group, didn't we get more indication that like Vance and Hegseth were kind of behind, the strikes and that diplomatic stuff than Trump was? Seems like his like will or his stuff wasn't even involved in that. Was there anything equivalent that ever leaked about Biden and his foreign policy? Oh, that leak was fucking crazy. Like that was okay. The incompetence there was like wild.
We see Witkoff and stuff as a foreign envoy. Do we see anything from Trump that's even
what we see compared to especially the last couple of years of the Biden administration is a vigorous president who has administrative goals and is pushing for them. Like, I think that there's a big difference in that. I don't think it's necessarily always good because I don't always want him to succeed in the things he's doing, but I don't think that it's fair to say that like there isn't a qualitative difference. It does seem like his fingerprints are on a lot of this stuff. You don't
What is a single goal that Trump is vigorously pursuing that isn't a personal vendetta right now?
I mean, if we looked at what Trump's campaign promises were, setting aside
right now what Trump is pursuing. What is Trump pursuing right now vigorously as an executive that's not a personal vendetta that you would expect your grandpa talking about at bingo night? What is Trump pursuing right now that's not a personal vendetta?
You don't think that like the mass deportations were like his agenda? That strikes me as, of course, his agenda. That was a core campaign promise.
Okay, so in his pursuit of that, when he gets on TV and talks about it,
you don't think the tariffs are his idea? That was a core campaign promise.
Tariffs feel like a personal vendetta to me as a way to get back.
Well, okay, holy shit! If we're just going to say that like national level trade policy is a vendetta, then okay, sure. But I mean, like that has.
I'm not just saying that. I can source all of this, right? I can say this is why I feel this way, right? So after he did the first Liberation Day, when he was talking in front of a bunch of Republicans, I don't know what it was. I don't think it was an RNC conference. It was something, and he's like, all these guys want to come and kiss my ass. When has Donald Trump ever talked about tariffs in a way that seemed like it was for the benefit of of like just the country and the nation. All of it feels like very personal and spite motivated to me. I guess that's just how I read it.
No, I mean, I think it can be both. I think that I do think he thinks they're going to work. I disagree with him. I think this is not answering your question, but like to me, tariffs are like just such a default bad idea that they're going to do bad things, and they're just as a result stupid, unless you get some extraordinary result. So I mean, look, he could prove me wrong, but like the default answer of should you do tariffs is no, you shouldn't do tariffs. So
Sure.
now that said, there's been, certainly recently he's gotten some progress in making deals made that could turn out well. I think it's too early to assess it. I don't it's at this point, I think the most optimistic version is that the trade deals kind of get us closer to normality than they do like get some like excess benefit. But I'm willing to look at that and see what happens. But
do you ever remember
that was his core campaign position? Like,
sure, yeah, but all of it just comes off as like, like we have to do this because these countries are ripping us off. They've been stealing from us and they've been treating us like idiots and they're ripping us off. Like all of this feels like very personal, spite based to me. I guess when I look at it.
Yeah, I mean that's literally how the dude talks. And this is one of my, in 2016, one of my big problems with him. And who said this? I think this might have been like a Ben Shapiro thing. Like there was just the entire vibe he had in 2016 was so destructive to the thing that really does matter to me a lot. And it just, I don't know how we get back to this universe where people just respected the office. And that includes the person who occupies it. Right. And like, that's the thing about him that if I had to pick the thing I hate the most, it's that. Like, I think it's I was visiting my family recently, and their kids use Donald Trump as an insult because their politics are what they are. And that's what's so crazy to me about that is that their kids are young, right? So like they could be teaching civics. That's the president, that's the leader. But because of where we are, they believe, and I'm not going to quibble them about it, that it's appropriate to, use the president's name that way because we're so far removed from the world of respecting the office. And I do think that's his fault. Like, I do think that was a 2016 Trump concoction, and that sucks.
Sure. Okay, but I mean, like, sure, but okay. So back to this, like, you're aware that Donald Trump like confused his ex-wife with Jean Carroll during the deposition for that civil case, right?
I didn't see that, but you can.
Okay. Yeah, it was embarrassing. He was given a piece of paper, and I asked to identify her, and he was like, "Oh, I would never have sex with that woman," or something. And they were like, "No, that's your ex-wife." And it was like, "Oh." Have you seen anything equivalent to Biden, where Biden is given an executive order and then it's explained to him, and then he signed it, like Donald Trump is with almost all of his executive orders?
I didn't watch. Like, I actually don't recall what Biden's press style was with executive orders. I don't recall. I mean, certainly they weren't theatrical in that way. Like, it would never have occurred to me to watch a Biden executive order signing. Like,
okay. He usually explains them before he goes to sign them, instead of having somebody hand deliver them and then explain what they are and then seem confused or seemed excited, like, this seems like a good idea, and then sign it like Trump does.
That was what Biden could do at the end of his term. Like, when it was like reading off a teleprompter, he was actually quite good. In fact, some of his
wait, quick, because you mentioned
were actually pretty good when he's reading off a teleprompter. Like he
you're aware that when he was doing his State of the Union, he was able to go back and forth while members of Congress like Marjorie Taylor Greene and other hellspawn were standing up and screaming at him, right? But when Donald Trump was doing his 63-day State of the Union, Mike Johnson had to get up like a babysitter and tell the Democrats that if they interrupted, they would be thrown out or arrested, so that they wouldn't interrupt his train of thought, right?
And the State of the Union was, let me see, I might have the chronology wrong. It was her report, then State of the Union, then debate, right?
Maybe?
Yeah, because my recollection, and again, I haven't looked at this chronology in forever, but my recollection was her report came out, and I was like, holy shit, that's bad. He did the State of the Union, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, that seems like a positive development. Like, I thought he did actually a pretty good job. And then the debate performance was just, like, oh shit, then something changed. So, I don't know. Like, I mean, I think that, like, I'm not a doctor. I think that people in my limited experience.
Wait, I know we're going back to this. I'm just asking for anything. It seems like there's literally nothing that could be presented about Donald Trump. There's nothing that could be presented about him that would make us think that maybe his mind is slipping. It seems like that's where we're at. Like, it's impossible.
Well, I think that he, it would be very difficult to get, I think you're right, like a document like the Her report about Trump just for a variety of practical reasons. I think it is possible for him to like fall apart in a public setting to the level that Biden did. That's not impossible.
Wait, like how?
I haven't seen him do that. I mean, the Biden debate was unbelievably bad, man. Like that was.
Yeah, you keep saying that. What do you think it was unbelievably bad when Donald Trump was sitting next to Macron and Macron had to keep correcting him on the amount of contribution that we've done to the Ukraine war? Or when he was standing next to Jerome Powell and he was just saying things that were patently untrue about the construction costs in the Federal Reserve buildings? Or when he was sitting next to Zelensky and he got the year wrong on when Crimea was taken over by Russia? Or when he was sitting next to the South African president and he didn't even know that the ICJ, International Court of Justice case about genocide was about Israel and Gaza? Like, I can name you like 20 things, but none of these are going to matter. But instead, we'll look at the debate performance where Biden couldn't have like a fucking super debate with Trump.
No, not a super debate. Not, dude. Can we just be honest for a second? Like the dude said, we need to defeat, then trailed off, and then said Medicare. Like I mean that.
Yes, and Donald Trump in a debate with Kamala Harris said they're eating the cats and the dogs.
Yeah. Well, he was lying. Like he's lying. Like of course. Yes.
I don't know if he knows he's lying. He could also just be senile and retarded.
I mean, didn't JD Vance admit they were lying about that?
He kind of said it later on, but I don't know if Trump knows that.
Okay, yeah, exactly. You don't know. But what Biden did was very, very obvious. Like I have not met one person who, has looked at that debate and said, okay, that guy's well. Right?
I agree that that's the narrative on it, but if I ask, I haven't met a single person. Can you tell me a single positive thing that Trump said in that debate?
No, Trump gave a D- performance. He was terrible. It's just that
but that's the expected performance from Trump.
Incompetent. And the point is that he was mentally incompetent and likely had been for a while, and that we were told he was sharp as a tack. And we were told that by the people that now wanted our vote and wanted it without a primary for that candidate. So like,
I'm looking at like Donald Trump sat at a desk with a piece of paper with the guy Abrego Garcia thinking that MS-13 that those were real tattoos. Like there's a million of these things that happens with Trump, and for Biden, could it really not be the case that Biden was just like mentally, he's a 90 fucking year old dude that he was mentally whatever that night and he just had a horrible fucking debate performance? Is that impossible?
I mean, it's not impossible if you're talking about like logical possibility. It does not seem to comport with the available information. And I think that let me put this another way. You don't think that this was a thing that caused a lot of distrust on the Democratic side, and that people were looking at that and saying like, you know what, like 10 years from now,
I think it caused a big issue. I think it caused,
that was a colossal fuck up. You don't think so?
I think that it was a big issue, but it was a big issue because conservatives were successful in making it a big issue. Yes.
Okay, so if conservatives had laid off a bit, you think that was fine? Like it would have
been a cringy performance, and in 3 days we would have gone to the next thing. And my evidence for that is every single thing that's happened in this current administration.
I think Trump's political resilience is a unique...
It's not just Trump, it's the whole conservative media apparatus. How many years did we have to hear about Hillary's emails? And then how many days did that Signal Group thing get play in the media before we moved on to the next thing?
I mean, yeah, I think we're seeing that play out right now with the Epstein stuff, right? Like Trump is many things. One of the things he's very good at is media strategy. Like that.
No, he's not. It's the conservatives that cover for him. He just lies over and over again, and everyone else in the conservative movement is willing to give him cover for it.
Like setting morality aside, because I think I've already said that like I'm opposed to this on many levels. But you don't think that the timing of the we got to investigate Obama thing is Epstein related?
Yeah, of course. Of course they're trying to.
And it's related because it's media strategy. Right? Like that's the point, is that
but it only works because all the rest of the Republicans will bite. That's the whole point.
So there's an apparatus. He understands how to wield the apparatus. I was saying, I was not making a moral point. I was saying he is very good at operating the media. This is a skill set of his. He's extraordinarily good at
But
it.
that's to say you're giving credit for something where there's like no credit is good. You watch Game of Thrones? It's like saying that Joffrey was really good at having people killed. He's the king, of course.
It's like when you make a joke about dead kids and I go, shit, that's a fucked up thing to say, but Destiny's pretty good at media strategy. Like I disagree with the thing you said, but I get why you said it. Like like it's a thing. Like there is a reward.
No, but it's a different. I'm just saying that Donald Trump is the president of the United States. I'm just like on YouTube. I'm just saying that the only reason that Donald Trump stuff works is because everybody else in the conservative movement is willing to be lockstep to carry that message for him.
And look, man, it's hilarious to me that like I have not argued that this was moral. I'm not making a moral prescription here. I'm saying it just in terms of like reptilian brain media strategy, it's the same move. Oh, like I want to get some attention. There's a way to do that. And one of the ways to do that is to do something kind of batshit that people are going to comment on. And he's really good at that. And it's not like
Yeah, but the difference is that when Donald,
in fact, you do it because it works. And
but it doesn't work as well for me. That's why I'm fighting against half the fucking universe, including all my people, when I do it. Donald Trump, meanwhile, can have the support for fucking everybody that he fucking wants.
Yeah. And there's two main reasons for that, which I think we've talked about. One, he's pretty good at this shit. It's his lifetime achievement. Two, the Democratic base is not cohesive in the same way. It just isn't. And this is a thing. I feel like Glenn Lowry and like Jordan Peterson and a bunch of like, kind of like the more intellectual conservative type people were predicting years ago, which is that the right-wing base has kind of a, honestly, it's more cohesive demographically. And when it turns into a mud fight, there's a real risk that some very bad people rise to prominence, which I think has been borne out, because in a mud fight, they're going to coalesce, and they coalesce better than the Democrats do. And I think I think that prediction's kind of been borne out in our politics of late.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just describing a cult. I agree that, like, obviously they have more cohesiveness, but I think the frustrating thing is that one of those, because I'll argue with people who, like, you're telling me, it seems you agree that there is some massive cohesiveness there, but then you don't agree that the reason why a lot of Americans feel a certain way about certain things is because that's what, like, the cult is showing them. And I think that...
I think that what happened with Trump is that for a long time, the Democrats were very, very successful using tools like identity politics and using them in national elections. And it worked. It worked successfully. John McCain was a racist. Mitt Romney was a sexist. Like these are things that were effective. They were effective political attacks. And then what ended up happening is, instead of running like a Romney or a McCain, which would be my preference for who would be run, to be honest, they found somebody who just doesn't give a shit about being called a racist or a sexist.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. My mind is getting exploded. Okay, I'm 36. Okay, so maybe I don't remember things. You're saying that Romney and McCain's biggest issues were attacks from the left? I feel like the Republicans had a lot of issues coalescing around these. For Romney, religion was a huge motivating factor for why people didn't like him as much. For McCain, that pick from Palin was totally out of left field. And I think a lot of people were worried that McCain wasn't quite the warrior that the Republicans were looking for at that moment in time, especially given how much hype there was around Obama. I don't think it was the Democrats that necessarily buried either of those two. But like a lot of that was...
We need to make a causal 100% type argument here. I'm merely pointing out that the Republicans were running kind of like gentleman type candidates, and that did not insulate them from attacks on the grounds of being racist or sexist. It did not work, and it was not electorally rewarded. And the Republicans eventually, and it wasn't like their machine picked him. He broke their fucking machine and took it over. But they coalesced around somebody who was willing to just say, yeah, fuck it, I don't care. Right? And the problem is that when you find somebody who's when they're called a racist or a sexist, their first reaction is fuck it, I don't care. That's probably not the best person. Like, honestly, like that is not, like, if you're somebody with a conscience, your first reaction is to be like, oh shit, that I can't believe they just said that about me. That's terrible. What happened? Right? And I think that this is where we ended up. I'm not saying it's like the Democrats caused the whole thing, but I do think
I
that
just don't think like the issues. I don't think that a Trump-like candidate would have any success on the Democratic side because they're not as primed to be like satanic hellspawn up and down through. Like we don't have a Comer, we don't have a Jim Jordan, we don't have a McCarthy, we don't have a Mike Johnson. These types of people that would be willing to play.
it would not work.
Like
it would not work.
But I think my whole issue is back to the prisoner's dilemma that I opened with. That's an unwinnable atmosphere. Then you can't, if the other side is willing to engage in such unbelievably degenerate and deplorable tactics to win, it's just hopeless. You're completely fucked at that point, I think.
Well, I think the way to look at this prisoner's dilemma is, and you could disagree with me on just the prescription, which is it's fine because this is just my intuition. This is not like data or law or something. I think that this like in the mud, down and dirty playing style is tremendously beneficial for the right. I think that they have a huge structural advantage in that kind of fight. And I think that the left would be better served by finding a battlefield that suits them better. That doesn't mean that they can't, make politics a full contact sport. But I think that this particular playing field ill suits them. And
yeah, but the whole like they go low, we go high, let's fight somewhere else doesn't like policy clearly didn't fucking matter. If you look at like legislation or anything like that, like economic stats or any of that shit obviously didn't matter. Balancing the budget, the one thing that Republicans supposedly care about, apparently that doesn't matter. Where else can they fight if this is where the Republicans have dragged the fight to?
Well, what they need is the thing that works, which is an inspirational candidate. They need somebody who makes people really believe in a vision of the future. I voted for Hillary. I did not think she was that person. I thought she was a policy wonk, and I thought she had a lot of other qualities that I appreciated, but I never thought she was that. I don't think.
I guess I agree with that. I agree with what you're saying. I think the difference is that I think that you think that we all are viewing these candidates in a some kind of like vacuum divorced from how the media presents them. What I'm saying is that you will never have that candidate on the left when the right is in control of so much of the media messaging apparatus. That inspirational figure literally can't exist because the right will be there to be in an unhinged attack dog on every single part of their existence.
When you say in control of the media apparatus, you mean like alt media? You mean Fox? What are you talking about?
All of it. I mean that they set obviously the talking points are controlled from the alternative and the right-wing media, but they've also mind-fucked liberals into being afraid of going after Republicans on points because they don't want to be seen as having Trump derangement syndrome, and they want to be better liberals than the other liberals. There's a way of like Jake Tapper making books on fucking Joe Biden or whatever other retarded shit that they're doing to prove that they're actually not totally taken in by the left and they're unbiased, fair reporters.
Yeah, if I was giving my prescription to the left, I for whatever that's worth, I don't think the left has to not be feisty or like not fight. What I think they need to do is they need to do it in combination with an uplifting, positive vision that's worth fighting for. I think that's when the left works. I think one of the things that happened is that the Trump is so bad talking point just had fatigue. Fatigue set in after all the time and all the investigations and all the hearings and all the court cases. And people started saying like, God, you talk about Trump so much, but I don't feel like you're giving me the same like, yes, we can that Obama did, or the same just like general, that's a good guy and he can get it done that Bill Clinton did. I think that was missing. And if you have that, then you can do all kinds of feisty shit and link back to that. And I think that works on the left. I don't think negativity works.
Sure. Okay. So there's another thing that happens in these conversations I noticed. So everybody on the left is treated like a human being with agency, and then people on the right are treated as, I guess, like permanently cognitively deficient, like 15-year-olds that can only vote in one way. Looking on the right, so we can say all these reasons for why the left sucks or blah, blah, blah. What is the psychology or physiogeny, I guess, of the right-brained person who can see somebody as abhorrent as Donald Trump and say, like, that's the guy that I want to vote for sure? Can we do this without blaming the left or blaming some part of whatever on the left media apparatus or a random article? Like, what is it? What is the draw over there? Because for all this like soul searching the left is supposed to do, Donald Trump lost in 2020. The soul searching they did was absolutely zero. They doubled down exactly on everything that Trump did and said, we're just going to do the same shit even more. And then they won the election. So like, what's working on the right for them that's so good?
I mean, I think that he is very, very good at appealing, and I said this earlier, to a base that did not exist previously. And that gives him it gave him the ability to smash the Republican machine and reforge it in his image. Which,
he appeals to all Republicans. I don't know why you mean this. I don't know why you're saying this. Donald Trump has like a 90% approval rating with all Republicans.
About when he broke through in 2016, how did he do?
We're not talking about 2016. We're talking about 2024. Yeah. He won that election.
Okay, so he breaks through and he reformed the political machine around himself, right? And he proved an electoral way forward. Now, that earned him a lot of, the kind of, like I was saying about Mitch McConnell, the kind of person who just wants to win. Now everyone's on board. Like, that's, I think, how this happened. I think that
I don't know. It doesn't, but even that explanation doesn't make sense. Electorally, he's a loser. Like, there were more bullet ballot votes for Trump than I think any recent conservative candidate, where people weren't even voting down ballot. They just wanted to vote for Trump. And the midterms have been disastrous under Trump. The upcoming midterms are probably going to be disastrous under Trump. They didn't get the red wave under Biden that they wanted. The midterms for Trump 1 didn't go very well. The special election candidates that he endorsed were all some were so disastrous. He had to kick Biden out of his fucking White House over the whole Roy Moore shit. Like, Trump's not even a winner electorally. He wins his one singular election, and then that's it. Like, he lost when he got Elon to go to Wisconsin and try to get their Supreme Court person elected, they got fucked there. Like, so even electorally, it's just, why were the Republicans so primed? I'll let it slide in 2016, but in 2024, how?
I think you're actually, I'm so glad you brought that stuff up. I think you're actually reinforcing the point that I made, which is that, like, there is a base or a segment of a base or whatever we want to call it that is loyal to him in particular.
90% of the Republicans, yes. 90% of them, yes.
Not 90%, because it wasn't like a 4-0 in the midterms. There is a chunk. There's a chunk that shows up when he's on the ballot and doesn't when he's not. So when he
but what about Nikki Haley and DeSantis for the presidency? These guys got no support. It's Donald Trump. That's what the Republic. It's not a small sliver. It's 90% of conservatives are like, this is his new god.
I think that the examples you brought up are exactly pointing to the contrary. Like, they lost. They didn't lose 90-4 or 96-4. They lost because there's a chunk of voters that don't show up when he's not on the ballot, and that changes the math.
I'm just saying for the election.
It's a chunk.
I'm just saying for 2024, like, Nikki Haley and DeSantis were non-factor. Trump didn't even debate them. He was like, "Fuck this." He didn't even have to. So I'm just curious, how was it that in 2024? How was he so powerful that he came back after everything from 2020 onwards? Those 2 years after, with the whole Jan 6 decision and all that, he came back afterwards. He still had the undying, unwavering support and devotion of the vast majority of the Republican Party. How?
Well, I mean, he did. Well, there's a number of factors there that played in, and I don't want to give them like a weight or an order because I think they all mattered. The first one was that Ron DeSantis was doing really well for a while and was trending upwards, and a lot of people were really excited about that. Like, I mean, even like, I know the last time I talked to Rob Knorr, like, he was saying that was his guy. That he wasn't voting for Trump; he was voting for DeSantis. That was his guy. Like, there was a lot of that, but he was still a second place, but he was climbing. But he turned out to be really bad on the debate stage, like really not a good candidate on the debate stage, and that was crushing. So
wait, against who? He didn't even get to debate Trump.
No, in the primary debates, he was like, he got crushed.
Against Nikki Haley.
Yeah, she was much better than him. Vivek was better than him.
Sure, but Nikki Haley and Vivek didn't pick up any voters. It's not like they were threats to Trump.
The people switched from DeSantis to Trump. Simultaneously, you had the court cases against Trump, which gave him like a huge boost. I mean, if you look at the timeline, when he started really taking off, it was when those indictments came out. Like,
why didn't the cases help Joe Biden, or why didn't the cases help Hillary Clinton?
Because the bases are different. They're different people. I
agree with you, but I'm saying the Republicans are worse people. These are bad humans. This is why I said demonic earlier. Yeah. Like, if that's the excuse that, it's just different people, that's why this side can have like Satan, and the other side has to have literally Jesus Christ. Well, it's just different people. That's what I'm saying, is that's an unworkable political system. You can't. There's no future there.
Well, I mean, I think that if your point is that the bases are very different, then that supports my point that the bases should use different strategies.
I'm not saying the bases are different. I'm saying one base is evil and will support evil, and the other base is not supporting evil. That's not just different. That's unworkable. It's an unworkable thing.
The thing about this is that level of hyperbole supports like fucking any conclusion. Like if you were talking to like the craziest goddamn tanky, they'd be saying
I'm sorry, hold on. In what world is Donald Trump not evil? Tell me why I can't use that word to explain him.
Okay, so you're gonna take the position that Trump is like ontologically evil, and therefore anything that is done to defeat him is good. That's.
I'm not saying he's ontologically evil. I'm saying his actions. He does evil actions. I don't think he was born that way. He just became a piece of shit through his life. I'm saying, how is Donald Trump not evil? How is he not an evil person?
I mean, you don't think that there are people who want the policy things that he's done? There are people who think deportations are a good idea.
I'm sure there are some, but I'm saying that Donald Trump himself is an evil person. Donald Trump is an evil person. He is an evil individual in a way that no other politician, even on the Republican side, seems to be, and on the Democrat side that I can find. Yeah, he seems to be an evil person.
Okay, so you're saying like he lacks moral character. That's the point you're making. Like,
or he's immoral. Sure.
Yeah,
yes.
He's an immoral person. Okay, so what? Like because he's immoral, your prescription is the Democrats should do something. I'm saying that the thing you are describing will not work. So if you thought he was evil, you still shouldn't do the thing I'm describing if I'm right, because it won't work. So what's your point?
My point is back to the beginning. If one side is willing to support evil to achieve or effect their ends, and the other side isn't, that's a fight you're always going to lose.
I mean, I think that what you're doing is that you're creating a dead end, and then there's no solution. So if in your world where 50% of the country, give or take, is evil and supports an evil man, like what would be the way forward in that situation?
But so Civil War 2.0, I guess, right? Or we just watch our shit get fucking bled away into nothingness. Yeah.
Well, then I really, really fucking hope you're wrong. Because if your opposed solution is Civil War 2.0, that's a goddamn bummer. So I'm going to bet on a different horse, because that seems like a shitty way forward.
Yeah, but there's a difference. You have to take action for that to not be the case. I'm sure there are a lot of Jews in cars that hoped that they weren't going to death camps, but you can sit there and hope it all you want. The train is on tracks that are going in one direction. And I feel like right now the Republican conductors are sending us one way, and we're saying, well, I hope it's not as bad as it's going to be when we get off the train. That's what it feels like.
Do you understand how crazy this fucking conversation sounds from my perspective? I'm not sure. Like, I keep saying...
Hold on, stop. No, wait. Hold on. I just want to be clear. I just want to be clear. You've conceded every single point on my contentions with Trump through this. I have said over and over again, if you want to argue this on any point I can, do you think that it's unfair for me to say that Donald Trump is an evil person compared to Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, that Donald Trump is evil and that the Republicans have a higher capacity for supporting evil than the Democratic side does? If you disagree with that, or you can agree with that, and you say, yeah, okay, Republicans will support evil. If you disagree, give me one category and I will argue it out as much as you want, I promise. Any category.
I think what you're doing is that you are ignoring the thing I keep saying because you would like to go down this talking chart, and that's fine. But what I'm saying is, if you think that this is evil, and if you think it needs to be defeated, why would you engage in a tactic that does not appear to work? That's the point I'm making. I'm saying that if you think that these people are evil, why would you engage in a battlefield of their choosing where they have a structural advantage? What is the benefit of that? That's what I'm asking you.
You can't, because that is the battlefield.
It's the battlefield because the Democrats can put up terrible candidates against him.
You can say, they're terrible because they're not evil. That's the problem. It's like me having a debate with Tim Pool, and I study so hard for the debate, and Tim Pool shows up with a machine gun and kills me, and you're like, why didn't you come with a better debater? It's like, fuck no, I needed to bring a fucking machine gun.
I mean, I think that Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris were weak candidates. They were weak. There's a lot of reasons for that, and some of that is hindsight. They were weak candidates. Biden was a stronger candidate, and he won.
You can say that Hillary and Kamala were weak candidates. We can run it down. You're not going to be able to find a single point that they were weak on that wasn't just directly related to conservative media messaging. Both were infinitely more qualified. Both were infinitely more intelligent. Both of them had better government records. Like that, in every single conceivable way, Kamala and Hillary destroy Donald Trump. And even being able to point to countries on a map, these guys were better.
And if elections were a civics test, that would be a great point. But it's a popularity contest, and they're weak candidates. I said earlier,
I understand that. They're not weak candidates. They were just easy to attack because...
and incredibly smart. And I voted for her because I like those qualities. But she's incredibly unlikable, and elections are popularity contests.
Unlikable? You say unlikable. You think that Hillary Clinton and Kamala were incredibly unlikable? Do you understand the irony in saying that when Donald Trump is the most unpopular president in all of U.S. history?
But he's incredibly funny. He's
not.
He is. He's very
He's
funny.
not. He is the most unpopular president. And the second most was the Trump first term. But because Republicans have a 95% approval rating for Trump, you can say things like this, but he's not. He's not that funny.
You don't think that Donald Trump is funny? That's
Trump won before he went senile was funny. The first set of Trump debates in 2016 was funny. Now he's a sad, old, miserable, crotchety fucking man who I'm praying. What? Sorry?
Meatball Ron? You didn't think that was funny?
No, I think it's funny in a way that, if you're looking at, a fallen hero whose mind is halfway rotted out of his fucking brain, it can be funny. But no, I don't think nicknames for other political people are the apex of humor.
No, it's still funny. You didn't think the McDonald's thing was funny?
What McDonald's thing?
Went on the campaign trail when he went and worked at McDonald's, then came out.
That wasn't supposed to be funny. It was funny in an ironic way because he was trying to appeal to the median voter. That wasn't supposed to be funny. That was supposed to be serious.
It was very funny. I mean, I don't know that he should make people vote for him, but it was funny. And I think the problem with this is that when you go this far down the, oh my God, these people are evil, he's evil, everyone's evil, then what you're doing, to go back to my prescription, is you're getting into this world of everything is about how bad Trump is, and we the Democrats are not charged with doing the one thing that fucking works for our party, which is giving an inspirational message. So do all this shit. I think you're great at it, but there needs to be an inspirational component that goes along with it, not just the combative side, because I think the thing you are doing is so close to working, but is missing the mark because it doesn't have the uplifting message attached to it. And that's what we need. And we don't have that. I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see it in Newsom. I don't see it in Jeffries. I don't see it on the Democratic side. It would be a good thing if that developed. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I understand you're saying that. That message can't develop when Republicans get to control how everybody feels about everything. So there's no point. There's no way you can put an uplifting message because they'll constantly just tell you everything is bad and horrible and falling apart, and then they get to control the media apparatus on that and say as much.
I mean, if the evil people have a mind control machine, why even bother talking about politics at all? Shit. We should pack it up.
Well, you understand that was Trump's strategy basically right? That's why he didn't debate anybody else in the primary. He didn't even have to debate Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis because he knew that he had the sycophantic obsession on his side that he would win the primary anyway, which he did with 75% of the vote, I think.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was not a great year for primaries, let's put it that way. But he was correct. He did not need to debate them. He had it locked up.
But think about what we're saying there. He had it locked up. He was going to run again against the same guy that beat him last time with more votes than all of U.S. history, and he won without even debating one of the most successful and prominent Republican governors in the country, and then other newcomers who were also making special media, Vivek Ramaswamy, I guess, and then whatever Nikki Haley was, right? And Trump was so confident that he could say fuck it and not even show up, despite the fact that he was running after being convicted of state crimes, after everything else. He was going to run against the same guy that beat him last time. And he's not going to change a single thing and run again. Is that confidence or is that cultish?
Well, I mean, the confluence of events there was pretty remarkable because you had Biden falling apart, you had Harris being the nominee, you had her being replaced post primary, which rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Then you had Ron DeSantis having nightmarish primary debate performances where he looked like he wasn't up to the job. The person who did really well in the debates was Nikki Haley, but she can't win because she's an establishment Republican running in a year where you had to be a populist. So, I mean, I didn't even mention the fucking assassination attempts, which in most political years would be enough to guarantee you a win in and of themselves. So, I mean, there's a lot of shit that happened. I don't know that I don't know that he's just lucky, or if that, how much of that was, political strategy. But there's a whole lot that went into that.
I just don't think that the current media environment is not conducive to anything you're saying. I think that Hillary Clinton, I think maybe not Hillary, maybe though, I think Hillary Clinton could have won in 2008 and in 2012. I don't think Barack Obama running as a first-time candidate, he would not win in 2024. Absolutely not. Because in 2016, Donald Trump's entry point into politics was that Barack Obama was born in Kenya. And I think in 2024, I think that would have carried much further. He didn't have the same sycophantic cultish hold over him, but I think that in 2024, I don't think a candidate like Barack Obama would even have Barack Hussein Obama would even have a chance of appearing on the political field. I think it would be so quickly and immediately buried by the Republican media apparatus.
No, it would have had to have been a populist version of, the same political talent, but a populist, not an internationalist, which is, unfortunately, that was just kind of like a populist year. That seemed to be what was moving the needle for people, which I think is in some ways the heart of the, what does the left do about the socialist, tanky, populist wing on the left, side of the spectrum debate, because, that was votes that were needed in 2024. Like that seemed to be what was animating people.
Well, I mean, everybody got less votes. I don't think they needed that. I think that they just lost the center left more than anything else, because everybody lost votes there. But I think inflation, everything hurt. But I don't know. Okay.
I certainly think center left matters. I mean, that I was amongst those votes they lost, so that certainly mattered to me. But we talked endlessly about that in our first conversations. I didn't.
How could you? The socialist wing of the party is like nobody in the government. Wait, it was kids at college what lost you the vote?
No. I was saying there's two separate issues, and maybe I misspoke or conflated them. One issue is, how do you activate the left wing of the party in a way that's productive, which is a tough thing to do because the left wing of the party is totally useless. The second point, which is unrelated, is that I'm a center left voter and they lost my vote. So I was saying that I tend to agree with your prescription about the center being lost because that's my vote. I don't know if I don't have numbers to support that, but I feel it emotionally because that's where I was.
Sure, but I'm saying the center left is lost because of the right wing media apparatus, right? I wouldn't consider you. I wouldn't consider you a center left voter at all. You're like a mega apologist is what I would consider you for voting. There's no world where if you take a totality of center left beliefs and I ask you between Trump or Kamala, I wouldn't be able to finish the sentence. But you're like, obviously, I would vote for basically almost anybody over Trump. Well, and if that's like if you pause to think there, you're not center left in any world. There's no way that you're a center left. You're center right at best,
well, so
right? If not,
I mean. We can quibble about whether I occupy center left and center right, and my own personal political evolution is interesting to me, but maybe not your viewers. But I think the more important point is that for 20 some odd years, I was a reliable left vote, right? Like I was voting left starting, I think I was too young in 2000, but like past 2000, I've been a reliable left vote. And whether you agree or disagree with the things that bothered me about the Harris candidacy and the Biden administration, those were things that were sufficient to me to not want to vote for them, even though I thought Trump was disqualified. Like in my mind, he should not have been president. So I said, I'm going to sit this one out because I don't think that I want either of them to be president. These are
but one of them is going to be president. So for sitting it out, it's a tacit endorsement of whoever ends up winning, right?
Well, I think that that's how our system works. So you can choose to vote. You can choose to vote for a third party candidate. You can choose not to vote.
Sure, but also it wasn't just sitting it out. You had a preference. You had a preference for Trump winning, right?
I didn't want either of them to win. So
but you preferred Trump over her because affirmative action was the single illuminating thing?
In a gun to my head scenario, yeah, I preferred him because I thought that she was not going to do anything useful about the border. I thought she was going to take the opportunity to appoint Supreme Court justices I would disagree with because of affirmative action, because of what I consider to be woke overreach. And, we put that in that bucket if that makes you feel better about it. There were a number of issues where I thought that she was the cover
Sure.
up of Biden's health, which we've talked
Okay.
about. You know,
So I think all of that is fine. I think it's fair. You're just a conservative, though, right? You wanted strong border, crazy deportation shit. You dramatically opposed affirmative action. You support this court, which is insane. The court is insane. So you're just like a conservative. It's a conservative position, right?
I'm an originalist, so of course I like an originalist court. That's not weird or surprising.
That might be fine that you're an originalist and you like an originalist court. This is not an originalist court, though, so that has nothing to do with this Supreme Court.
They absolutely are an originalist court.
How? In what sense?
I mean, we did a whole debate on actually we didn't do originalism. We did the pardons. No, we did immunity. Sorry, we did immunity. In what world where we've invented criminal immunity for the president is this an originalist court? There's a whole new wholesale cloth fabrication of categories for presidential actions to prevent the president from being convicted of a crime. I think this is a misstatement of actually just a misstatement. It doesn't work in a number of ways. I think the first question that you ask when you're asking an originalist framework is, can we resolve this? Like, can we know what was meant by various provisions? And they did look at the structure of the Constitution. And as we went through, and people can look at this, we talked about it for hours, they looked at the meaning of those and then asked, what does that mean for the structure of the Constitution? There's nothing about that's inherently unoriginalist. It's exactly the sort of analysis that you would look towards. Originalism is not as shallow an inquiry as I think you're making it out to be.
My understanding is that back in the 1700s, there were crimes and criminal things, and if you wanted the president to be immune from criminal things, you would probably just write it down. There is absolutely nothing in the founding documents. Yeah. There's absolutely nothing written at the time from any of the founding fathers. There's a reason why Roberts and the rest of the fucking clowns on the bench relied on Nixon v. Fitzgerald to try to fabricate this concept of criminal immunity from a civil immunity case, where the judges on that case said that there would obviously be no criminal protections. There's no way that you can say there's an originalist reading of any part of the Constitution that would imply the president of the United States, founded in a country revolting against a king, would want to make the president of the United States immune against crime with wholly new fabricated buckets of actions.
So if we're going to do this again, first, there is when you're doing an originalist analysis, there are going to be areas where you don't get the cleanest original meaning, right? And the reason is because there are things that are just very different. Like, for example, there was no federal police force who would have been charging the president with crimes at the time of ratification. So there's just some big structural differences. So what they did is they looked at the structure of the Constitution and looked at what that implies. What is the meaning of that? So I know we've gone through this already, so in case I'm boring you, I'm sorry. You look at the pardon power, for example, and you ask, well, could Congress criminalize the president's use of the pardon power? The answer is no, they couldn't, because it's a core and exclusive power. It's his.
Hold on, wait, I'm so sorry. Hold on, I just have to ask. You said there was no concept of a federal police?
At the time of ratification?
What the fuck was the point of the federal government? How would the executive have enforced any power from the Congress without any kind of federal enforcement?
The federal government was much, much smaller at the time of ratification. It didn't do.
I'm asking, if the Congress passes a law, you're telling me that effectively the executive branch had no teeth? I thought that all we heard in that immunity case was a vigorous executive. How do we have a vigorous executive with no police or ability to enforce laws?
The FBI didn't exist, right?
I didn't say the FBI is not the only thing, right?
I've not done a survey of every agency or actor in the federal system at that time. I am unaware, and if anyone in chat knows and could point me to something that'd be helpful, but I am unaware of any equivalency of the FBI or the modern DOJ in that era. I think that at that point, the president's powers domestically were much, much smaller than they are today. They were it would be the barest fraction of what they are today. I mean, keep in mind.
But how would the feds have enforced literally anything if they had no? What was the enforcement mechanism for the executive?
I'm not positive, actually, but most of the domestic law was very, very minor. For example, back then, interstate commerce meant interstate commerce, so you couldn't pass a law that affected the economy of a state that was just inside the state. So they could say if there's a federal law that says, okay, you can't require a passport or documents to travel between states, but they couldn't, for example, pass a law that says, you can't grow this much corn. Like it had to, it was like the federal government had very limited domestic powers at the time of ratification. It was only later when the Commerce Clause got extended that the federal government started to have the power to really control most state policy.
Okay, even if I grant that the U.S. Marshals were founded in 1789, okay, obviously there's going to be some form of federal enforcement but even ignoring, no, I wouldn't ignore that. Even if you want to say this, in what part does that imply?
What were the Marshals doing in 1789?
I'm forcing something federally, I guess.
Okay, we can look it up later.
We could be talking about like state, I guess, prosecution or whatever as well, though. Like states could investigate the president. Like, what part of the founding of this country would ever give anybody the implication or the idea that the president of the United States was supposed to be immune from any kind of criminal prosecution?
Where I was going is, the Constitution does not give Congress the power to criminalize the president's use of the pardon. You would agree with that? It's a core and exclusive power of the president, right? Like, Congress could not pass a law that says the president cannot issue a pardon.
I would agree with that, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Congress could not pass a law that says if the president does issue a pardon, we can prosecute him.
If that was simply the text, yes. But
yeah, and in fact, and this is the point that the court was making when they ruled on immunity, Congress can't pass a law that implicates the pardon power because the pardon power is outside their jurisdiction. For example, they can't pass a law that says there is no federal business done on Wednesdays, and if federal business is done on Wednesdays, we can charge you with the crime. And if the president does a pardon on Wednesdays, they can't charge him with the crime because his pardon power is outside of their jurisdiction. They have limited authority, and that is not within their authority.
That's fine that it's not within their authority, but there are plenty of things that can be outside of the authority that can still implicate you in other crimes.
So,
for instance, I can say, I hate you and I wish I could kill you, and that wouldn't be a crime. But if I said that, and then I made a plan with a person to do it, and then I went to a store and I buy something, and I start driving to your house, I can be implicated in a conspiracy to murder. Now, it's not a crime for me to go to a store and buy a chainsaw. It's not a crime for me to talk about wanting to kill you. But if I start doing these things in conjunction with other things, I can be charged with a criminal conspiracy to commit a crime. Yeah. But so the pardon, we're not talking about Congress criminalizing the actions themselves, but rather criminalizing illegal conduct. Rather than, you're trying to make this argument that we're saying that the immunity thing was just a good faith interpretation of the Constitution to protect the president's core powers. But that's not true. The immunity ruling was actually the way for the president to extend his core powers in a way that makes him immune from crime. Rather than saying we shouldn't make it illegal for the president to pardon people, we've said that we shouldn't make it illegal for the president to murder somebody as long as it's done in conjunction with the pardon power. And there is absolutely nothing in the founding doctrine of this country, which is why this court relied so heavily on that Fitzgerald case in order to make this argument. There was no founding father implication of criminal immunity for the president. There was no early congressional support for this concept anywhere.
The key case I'm relying on is not Nixon, it's Youngstown Steel. But and Youngstown Steel was the case that announced this analysis, which is that when you're asking whether the president has authority to do something, you ask whether he's doing something that's within his core and exclusive powers, whether he's doing something that is concurrent with Congress, and if it's concurrent with Congress, whether he has their approval or disapproval. So it's
Youngstown was still related to civil stuff, though. None of this implied at any point criminal immunity ever. Nobody has this in the whole of the United States, except for foreign ambassadors.
The framework that the court applied, and then, as I think you've conceded, though you can tell me if I'm misinterpreting what you just said, the court reasoned, looking at things like the pardon power, that there are areas where the president has core and exclusive power, meaning Congress cannot criminalize it, meaning he must be immune, because Congress does not have the power to criminalize the thing that he is doing.
I don't need the Congress to tell me that. That's obvious and plain in the text and what the president is being allotted. The Congress couldn't charge him with a crime for going to war, obviously.
Okay, so then you agree there are areas of immunity. So then, since there are areas of immunity...
No, hold on, wait. Those aren't areas of immunity. That's just the stuff he's allowed to do. We don't have to... He's not committing a crime. Crimes require a state of mind, a mens rea, to actually commit the crime. Where there's no immunity there, he's just not committing a crime. Going to war is not a crime in the United States when you're the president of the United States.
But if Congress passed a law that said it is illegal for the president to declare war on Venezuela, and then he did declare war on Venezuela, that law would be unconstitutional.
The law would be unconstitutional, but not because it's criminalizing the president's behavior, but because it's in conflict with the Constitution. They would need an amendment to get rid of the president's power to declare war.
To criminalize that behavior. They don't have the power. That's the argument. That's why there's immunity, because if you are criminalizing that behavior, it is unconstitutional. So
nobody's trying to criminalize the behaviors of the president, though. Nobody's saying that you can criminalize his ability to pardon. That's never been part of the conversation.
Yeah, but so then once you've established that there is a core area of immunity, which I think we have agreed that,
we don't agree on that. You're just saying, like, let's say that a teacher has the ability to issue a detention to a student, right? It's like you go to class, you're late to class, and the teacher has the ability to issue you a detention. And let's say that a student says, oh, like, I don't think the teacher should be able to give me a detention. I think that if the teacher gives me a detention, he should be fired or whatever. You wouldn't ask the principal to pass a bylaw or something saying that, like, teachers are actually not allowed to be fired if they issue a detention. Like, no, that's not, you wouldn't, they have the ability to issue detentions. The concept of firing them for doing a detention doesn't even make sense. There's no world where you wouldn't need that protection. Much like if the president has the ability written in the Constitution to do a particular thing, he doesn't need criminal immunity because he's not committing a crime. If we speak of crimes, we're talking about federal statutes. We're talking about things that we can cite in the U.S. Code that says this is a crime. The president's not committing a crime when he's doing his job, so he doesn't need protection against crimes to do his job.
Let's say that there is a vague criminal statute, which we've had several of in the course of our history, that you can charge a lot of different behavior under, and we can make up the details, it doesn't really matter. And then they use that statute to charge the president with a crime for issuing a pardon. Do you think he should be able to be prosecuted for that?
Normally I don't do this in debates, but I feel like I would need an example. Like, I would need to, because the important part of the crimes, of criminal stuff in the United States generally, unless we're talking some statutory restriction, but you need a state of mind to commit the crime. Like, what is the crime?
I actually don't think you need an example, because what we said before is that they don't have the power. It doesn't matter whether or not, like, how they wrote the law, they don't have the power. Like, the Constitution does not give Congress the power to criminalize his use of the pardon. So whether or not they write a creative law is irrelevant. They don't have the power, just like they don't have the power to criminalize him.
Sure. Yeah. Then the Sotomayor question is, do you think the president has the right to go to a man and say, listen, I want you to go and murder that person over there, and as long as you do it, I'll pardon you, and you'll be safe? Do you think that that is a non-justiciable issue that can't be touched, nobody can look at it? You think that's okay, that the founding fathers, that the architects of our Constitution, and every Congress since then would be okay with that?
I don't know how the court would handle that under the immunity decision.
I'm not asking how the court would handle it. I'm asking you, do you think that the people, when they wrote the Constitution, that the president should be able to direct somebody to murder somebody with the offer of a pardon afterwards, and that should be okay?
I think that the use of the pardon is not something that Congress can make criminal. The question you're raising is, if the power of the pardon is used conditionally with some kind of personal behavior that is outside of the president's scope of the office, is that something that would be criminal? And I would hope the answer is yes, but we don't know. We
can't touch it. First of all, hold on. I just want to be very clear here. So you're telling me that we don't know what the intentions would be of the architects of the Constitution for whether or not the president could order people to commit murder as long as he promised a pardon afterwards. You're saying we can't possibly know. We don't know this. We don't know what they would think about that.
I think that we do know that the pardon power is outside of Congress's scope. So the use of the pardon in your example, we know is not something they can criminalize. The question is, can they criminalize the second half, where he makes some kind of quid pro quo? And that was the Justice Barrett.
The three-legged stool, So I'm asking, so how is there a quid pro quo with no quo?
Well, but if you read Justice Barrett's concurrence, her concern, and it's my concern as well, I think she had the best version of that decision. Her concern wasn't that you couldn't charge the bribery scheme. Like, she assumed you could, and because she assumed it, I'm assuming it as well. Her issue was that the evidentiary rule, which is a bit more nitpicky than the kind of big picture stuff we've been talking about, would make it very, very hard to charge that, like, to actually.
It wouldn't make it very hard, it would make it impossible. Because the evidentiary we were talking about is the fact you can't even probe the intention for the action in order to. We've already talked about this, but like I agree with her. I think that
her concurrence is the correct view, and hopefully down the road, her concurrence is the one that rises to ascension if we have other cases, because I think she did actually have the best position.
That's fine. No offense to Barrett, though. This is dicta. Who cares? The holding of the case doesn't mention anything about, well, who knows about the evidence. The holding of the case is that this is not a thing you're allowed to probe, especially for core powers, right? You can't probe any of the institutional. So how do you even prove it? So again, and I'm just trying to poke on the originalist idea that you have here. If you go to the founding fathers, you say, somebody says, hey, listen, if you murder that dude, I'll pardon you. Okay, quid pro quo. Murder that guy, and I'll give you a federal pardon.
That's not what originalism is.
Well, you're saying the idea that this is something that if we read the original text of the Constitution, we could plainly see that the founding fathers would have wanted this to be part of the framework of our government, that the president would be untouchable from criminal indictment, right? So I'm just...
The originalist part of the logic is the one that I gave you, which is that the Constitution has a fixed meaning and it means what it meant as it was publicly understood, not what founders thought in their private thoughts, not their intentions, but how things were understood to mean. And
I'm curious that in this court case there was
that was clear is that there were core and exclusive powers granted to the president and not to Congress. So they can't
That's not the question.
Those things. So there is a zone of immunity, and that's the originalist point.
You don't need criminal immunity for your job to not be criminal. You don't need criminal immunity for any of that. How is it that was it by chance that the president of the United States just happened to navigate precariously our system for 200 plus years without having to be charged for a crime?
So you're moving off originalism because what I said makes sense to you, or is that...
No. I'm not moving off originalism. Nothing that you're saying implies that the original meaning, like when you say the original meaning of the Constitution meant that Congress couldn't make a crime out of like a presidential action, nobody disagrees with that, but you don't need criminal immunity for that.
Well, you do if they have in fact made it criminal.
No, it would just be unconstitutional. No part of the criminality, you don't have to use that word. If Congress passed a law that said, today we're outlawing the president's use of the pardon power, you wouldn't have to go through the courts and say, oh my God, can they charge him with a crime and blah, blah, blah. The Supreme Court would eventually, and they go, sorry, but the Constitution says otherwise. You need an amendment to change this. Boom. You don't have to talk about criminal immunity. You wouldn't say, oh no, the president can't be charged with crimes because it's a core power. You would say, you can't get rid of that core power with a law. The Congress's laws are beneath the Constitution.
What exactly is the difference in your mind between saying the president is immune to crimes that infringe on his core and exclusive powers, and it is unconstitutional to charge him with crimes in his core and exclusive powers?
Because in one, you're talking about passing a statute by Congress that would be... The statute by Congress would be plainly unconstitutional.
No, it would be unconstitutional as applied. It would be unconstitutional as applied to him.
No, it would be unconstitutional. If the Congress passed a law saying the president is no longer allowed to pardon, that, my imagination is that law would be struck down as unconstitutional.
That one would be, but if the law said no federal business will be conducted on Wednesdays, and he did a pardon on Wednesday, that law is not unconstitutional in general. It's unconstitutional as applied to him in the context of his pardon power.
Wait, why would that be the case?
Because Congress can pass a law that says, to the extent that they have control over the federal government, the areas where they have control, they could pass a law saying no federal business will be done on Wednesdays. There's a lot of areas where Congress has total control. It's just there are certain areas that are core and exclusive to the president. And there are certain things Congress can't do. Like they can't they can't fire judges, for example.
What is that? So then they couldn't make any law for anything relating to the president? Or I guess I don't understand that.
They couldn't make laws for the areas where he is a core and exclusive power. If they can't regulate his core and exclusive powers. If it's a concurrent power, if it's a power that they share with the president, that's different. And most powers overlap. But there are certain powers that don't. And the ones that don't...
I'm aware that it's in the core and the official acts. I guess I just don't know why you would have to give him criminal immunity to strike down these laws.
And this is what I'm saying, like the difference between saying the criminal law is unconstitutional as applied to you because it's controlling your core and exclusive power unconstitutionally, and you are immune from that prosecution for the exact same reason. The immunity is basically the same thing. It's just making clear what your point was, that this would be unconstitutional.
I don't
You're
think
not allowed to do it.
the reason why I don't think it's necessarily the same thing is because the laws that Donald Trump was being charged for violating weren't like laws trying to necessarily limit his presidential power, but obviously they were in conjunction with his presidential powers because he was the president when he was committing the crimes.
Well, they implicated his core and exclusive powers as applied. That's what I was saying about an as applied challenge. Like they're not unconstitutional in general. They're, like there's a lot of laws that are constitutional in general, but are unconstitutional in specific circumstances.
Why did Ford pardon Nixon?
Because he was a wise man.
But Nixon could have never been charged with any crimes. Is that the assumption that we... Like, do you think that any president prior to Trump thought that they could never be charged with a crime?
Asking the judicial realism point? Like, I don't know.
No, I'm just like this. Like, I think you know, and I know that the United States, no president in the history of the U.S. thought that they were above being criminally charged for committing crimes while president. I don't think that's been a thing since Trump. And now there are people, centrists or center-left voters, I guess, like yourself, whatever that means, who are defending this concept that actually the president can be immune from being convicted of a lot of crimes. And that's never, ever been the understanding in the United States of America. Well, and I don't think anybody, the founding fathers, no originalist, nothing.
The question was never squarely asked. And this is the thing about some of these, like, sui generis, first time, big ticket constitutional questions. It's like, once you ask the question, you have to live with the answer, right?
Well, I think the question was squarely asked. I would argue Nixon squarely dealt with this, because there was a whole investigation and a criminal investigation that implicated him. Why would they even waste their time if these are... Nobody was thinking of presumptive immunity or challenging it on those grounds.
It never got to the court. Like, he was pardoned. It never got that far.
Sure, but I mean, like, why would you even bother investigating if you didn't think it could go anywhere? And nobody had this, like, nobody in the government, nobody in the courts, nobody was putting up this argument. Nobody had the assumption that, the president, like, you can't even be charged with a crime. Like, who cares, right?
I mean, but yeah, clearly they didn't. But that's what happens when you take something to the Supreme Court. You learn, they tell you what the law is. That's their function. Right, that like they just didn't get that far. Obviously, they thought they could investigate him. So obviously, someone in the federal government thought you could charge him. I would agree with you. They were just turns out wrong.
Okay, so then I guess the answer to my original question, not the original, but the answer to one of my questions. So if the president says to somebody, "You can go murder that dude, and then I'll pardon you if you do it," you think that would be a thing that originally, as the original Constitution was written, that would be a protected action? Then they would have wanted that to have been a protected action. If you could resurrect all of the original framers.
If we're looking at, like, this is going back to what we were saying about Justice Barrett and why her concurrence, and really, if people are interested in this topic, I encourage you to read her concurrence, because her version of this would work so much better. But in any event, her assumption was that in a bribery case that implicated the president's immunity, he could nonetheless be charged for the stuff that was outside of his role as the president, which I would say go murder that guy probably is. That sounds like it'd be outside his role. The problem then is that whether you could actually introduce evidence of the quid pro quo, which we talked about briefly earlier. And I think that there was a part of the immunity decision that was too sweeping, in my opinion, where the court said, basically I haven't read it in a while, but basically any evidence that goes towards the things that are immune cannot be introduced, which would make it very hard to introduce, for example, like, how do you get evidence of the conversations around the pardon? Like, to what extent is that all excluded now? That would be quite challenging. Not impossible, but quite challenging to work with. So in that respect, I think we agree.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, do you think that the original framers would have thought that the president couldn't be convicted of crimes, that he would have this type of immunity?
That's not the originalist inquiry. It's not what they thought. It's what the provisions they enacted meant. They enacted the provisions that gave him these core and exclusive powers.
Well, no. When we say what they thought, when you talk about originalist, you're talking about what did they think when they implemented these? What was the original understanding of these things at the time?
So one of the miscommunications about originalism, and in fairness, there are different schools of thought and there are different originalists, but if you're talking about like Scalia, Barrett, like the mainline originalism, the question is not what did the founders intend? The question is... No,
I understand that. I'm not saying what they intend. I'm saying that, like, what was the understanding of the text at the time?
What was the publicly understood meaning of the text? And I would say that the publicly understood meaning of the text was that Congress did not have control or ability or power over these areas, which meant that they were for the president and the president alone. Hence, he could not possibly have been criminally charged for these things. Though at that time, I think the idea of criminally charging a president was like unthinkable anyway. But that's neither here nor there. Because now that's getting to like the mind reading exercise that I think is inappropriate.
I feel like it's been a while since I've read it, but I'm pretty sure Amy Barrett's concurrence, in part, I would argue. I'd have to go back and reread, but I'm pretty sure it was a dissent in part, but she had to join for whatever fucking reason. Because for her concurrence, I think the big part that she concurs on is what I'll concur on, but I don't think you need a ruling for this. It's just that, like, obviously you can't make it illegal for the president to do what he does. But I guess that we're looping, because I'm just saying you don't need a law. You don't have to protect the president's core powers because you can be charged with a crime.
She agreed that there's immunity. And she agreed that immunity should follow. What she would have done, which I think is a better version, is actually she would have structured it the kind of more similar to the way you explained it here, which I think is the more intuitive way of doing it. You charge a crime, and then the president says, actually, as applied to me, that law is unconstitutional. And the judge says, you're right. Okay, I'm going to kick it out of court, which is functionally the same thing. But I think it is a cleaner articulation and is better as a result. So I mean, I think she was 100% right. She's been an absolute treasure on the court.
Okay. But we came here because you said you value this Supreme Court's rulings on things.
Yeah, I think. I mean, you can't be surprised by that. Like there's a lot of stuff where the Supreme Court has rulings that have been down the middle, solid originalist rulings. And if you are an originalist, that's a good thing. They are the branch of government that appears to be working right now. So, thank God for that.
I'm guessing you agree with the elimination of basically injunctions against behavior.
That was a tough one for me. That was a tough one for me, because the thing about originalism and just like good judging, honestly, just good legal reasoning, that is very, very hard, and I fell victim to this, is that you're really not supposed to be outcome oriented. Your question should be like, what does the law say? What is the Constitution say? Not what do I think my policy preferences are. And I was talking to Pisco about this because before it happened, and I was saying like, God, I kind of hope they find a way to keep them. They cause a lot of problems, but it seems like it's useful. And I read Justice Barrett's decision, and she correctly pointed out that the policy issues don't matter. Like, the court isn't there to decide policy. The court is there to decide, was the judiciary given this power? And the answer
I'm just curious,
no.
does it bother you when you say, so I agree with you actually fully there, that the Supreme Court shouldn't be trying to, like, the Supreme Court should not be utilitarian, right, in its rulings, right? Does it bother you that for the big, it feels like a really big argument they leaned on for striking the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, a really big argument they leaned on is that it would create a patchwork of enforcement amongst the states for whether or not to include a president on the ballot. Did it bother you that that was a significant part of their reasoning for the 14th Amendment? Because I would argue that was almost entirely utilitarian outcome determinative in its approach.
I mean, did you disagree with them? You thought that they should have let that happen?
Well, it's not a matter that I disagree. It's how was the amendment written? It seemed like if you had engaged in some behavior that you weren't allowed to run for office again if you'd already been an office holder. That was a pretty plain and unambiguous reading of the text, I think.
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting question. I haven't read that in a long time, so I'm gonna need to read it again. I don't want to go too much out on a limb. I mean, what's interesting about that one is that the utilitarian stuff does kind of bleed into the meaning, in a sense, because like the idea that each state could veto the president, essentially, is so unthinkably catastrophic to the constitutional order. It's difficult for me to imagine that anyone understood that provision to mean that. But I really would need to look at that again. I haven't read that in months. So I don't want to speculate, because that I might just be putting words in their mouth.
I mean, isn't the time, manner, and place thing like pretty clear in the Constitution for allowing elections to be ran in states for how they choose to do so? Or
yeah, but then the question there was whether you could strike someone from the ballot for a civil determination that they had committed an uncharged
Well, not
crime.
civil determination. It didn't say anything about crime, just if they had engaged in a thing. I do agree that it sucks they didn't put the process down, but if we're looking at just a plain reading of the text, and I mean,
Well, but that was the thing that, like, as I recall from that decision, again, I'm doing this from memory, so if I get this wrong, forgive me. But the big debate amongst the concurrences was, or dissenters, I can't quite recall. Yeah, no, it was concurrences because it was 9-0. Sorry, it was a 9-0. Was, did they go too far by saying that it has to be a congressionally described crime? It couldn't be a state described crime, right? Like, it couldn't be that, like, Colorado passes a law that says insurrection is this, and then uses that law to make a determination that Trump is an insurrectionist and then bans him from the ballot. It has to actually be Congress who creates a law that then could trigger this provision. And I think that's what the concurrences were upset about. So there was kind of a lively debate, let's say, amongst the justices about, like, who has this power.
are you going to then be? Can I get you on record right now? A plain reading of the 22nd Amendment, then I think would survive, or it would be defeated by the Supreme Court's reading then, saying that, like, no person shall be elected or whatever. If Trump runs for a third term and some states decide to remove him from the ballot because they think that the 22nd Amendment precludes him from doing so, and then the Supreme Court comes back with the exact same rationale, saying this amendment does not give, in plain reading, the power to the states to strike somebody from the ballot, and this is a federal issue, so if he wants to be impeached or something afterwards, that's for the federal government to decide.
No, that provision's totally clear. Like if someone who was 34 years old ran for president, states should remove him from the ballot. Similarly, someone who's, like, not a natural born citizen.
What if there's a disagreement between two states on age?
Well, I mean, there's no real dispute as to what the 35 means, right? Like, I mean, it means.
Well, what if somebody has a birth certificate and there's, like, a question? So, like, what Donald Trump tried to do with Obama's birth certificate.
Yeah, I would imagine that would go to the Supreme Court and it would be litigated, and then they'd say this is what the fact is of the matter is, if that was a legitimate dispute.
That would have been a really interesting thing for the Supreme Court to do with the insurrection thing, but they didn't do that. They only ruled on the amendment itself. They didn't actually make a factual determination there. Well, I thought, actually, wait, what you just said, I don't think the Supreme Court does do, unless they have, like, they would require what, original jurisdiction to the question as the first, like, matter, because the Supreme Court isn't usually a court of factual review, right? They just do law, right?
But in that circumstance, like in the circumstance you're describing, there would be dueling factual determinations made by state or lower courts, right? So there'd be an evidentiary record that this guy's 34. There's an evidentiary record that he's 35, right? The whole record gets passed up on appeal, and what they're not going to take new evidence necessarily, though that's such an extraordinary circumstance that I actually don't know if they have the powers to do that in extraordinary circumstances. They might.
Yeah, but what you just said was the exact same thing for the immunity ruling. Colorado passed up from their record that they believed it engaged in insurrection, and that was challenged on whether they could even say that or do that. And the court, of course, this wonderful court that is too scared to take on major questions, decided, oh, well, we're not going to decide that. We're just going to say you guys don't have the power to make that decision for yourself. And I feel like that the same thing could come up with the 22nd Amendment stuff because of the way that the amendment is worded.
Obviously this is a tricky bit. And this is, by the way, one of the... I think
just to be clear real quick, I don't think any of this is tricky at all. I think it's plainly obvious. I think that you've got yourself in a bind because you're trying so hard to defend the insane positions that this court has taken on issues that now it's like a really difficult and tricky thing to do because you're not being an originalist at all. I feel like in some sense to be an originalist should make this really easy to answer, but like you become very outcome determinative when it comes to the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But for like the core powers thing, well, now we're like very deontological in our approach. I think that's the confusion right now.
Well, the thing about this that's tricky is that you're pointing to a decision that was not made on originalist grounds because it was signed by 9 justices, many of whom are not originalists. So when you have commonality between all the justices, they're going to make decisions. They're going to write things that get votes for all the justices, right? So yes, I struggle a little bit with an opinion that was written in a way that is not the judicial philosophy because it was signed by justices who do not ascribe to that judicial philosophy. And if you limited it to that judicial philosophy, you wouldn't get their votes. So
that's not necessarily true because there's also good evidence in this particular case. I might agree with you, but one, it could have been a 6-3 ruling, but also there is evidence in this individual case.
It really couldn't be a 6-3 ruling. That was a very important ruling to get 9-0. It
was a 6-3. It was a 6-3 ruling. When the original PDF was published, people saw that the 3 people had been written for dissent in part, but I think that before they published the opinion, I think they were like, fuck, we should probably be together on this. Roberts did not change the writing on the majority holding here. They just all decided to come together.
How on earth do you know that?
it was massively talked about at the time that when the PDF was uploaded, that originally it looked like it was a 6-3 ruling, that there were three, whatever people had been written separately, but when it was released, it came out as a 9-0, but it was in the either in the PDF title or the metadata, but you can look for it, like 6-3.
That could be explained in a whole number of ways, such as we circulated a draft, it only got 6 votes, and then we changed the draft, now it has 9 votes, and then some clerk fucking uploaded the wrong thing. Like, that's not extraordinarily complicated to come out with a different interpretation of that.
Sure, it's possible that that could have happened, and it only ever happened with this PDF that was published, and no other Supreme Court ruling has had that happen before. That is possible, but I think it was more likely that they actually. I think I don't think it was Sotomayor. I think it was Amy herself even said in that ruling that it's important that our writings on this turn down the temperature of the country as opposed to turning up the temperature of the country. Yeah. So I think they saw themselves as needing to be aligned on this one because of how charged the issue was.
Decision to get 9-0. It was super important to get 9-0. But we are speculating. Like, I don't know if the 6-3 version looked different than the 9-0 version. I would assume it does because that's why, that's how the sausage is made at the Supreme Court level, to be honest with you. That's how you get votes. And if you don't change the text, I don't know why they would change their position. But it's possible that they just thought this one was worth it. It would be strange given how scorched earth the dissents have been recently. But maybe that one, they didn't feel like that was.
Well, the reason why I think they've been scorched earth was the mistaken assumption that if people play fair and play by the rules, that the country will return to normalcy. But the reality is, and it's actually in a way it's a microcosm or a macrocosm of our conversation here, I don't think there's any benefit to like not going scorched earth and to try to come back in the center, because the Republicans will just rape the entire country over and over and over and over again as long as they feel like they have the opportunity to do so. Because I think they're supporting evil right now, so they see no virtue in any kind of compromise, and that's just where we're at. And yeah, I don't think we've gotten anything for any compromise so far. I think we just have lost over and over and over again on it. So yeah, that's the difficult argument to not go, I guess, at least that hard in the next direction for when the next Democrat becomes president again. Like the rules you're setting are that you're just saying it's okay to do that.
To avoid circling, because I don't want to go.
Sure, yeah, we don't have to circle over. Yeah,
we've been talking about. I will say though that one of the big misconceptions about originalism is that anybody who is a serious, and the reason this misconception exists is because people who don't know very much about originalism talk about it a lot. Originalism is not perfect. If you look at like Justice Scalia's speeches or writings about originalism, he would concede that there are cases where you just can't do originalism. It doesn't work. For example, you might just not have the historical record you need to conduct the inquiry. Or there might be some other factors that make it impossible to do originalism. And in those cases, he admitted that he would then use other tools, because it's not that originalism is like this panacea or is a perfect judicial philosophy. It's just the only one that in any way, even in principle, constrains justices to the meaning of the Constitution, to the meaning of the text, and doesn't make it just a policy preference on the justice's side. And
so this would be the question.
You might think it doesn't work, but the alternative doesn't even pretend to avoid that. That is what living constitutional at heart is.
That's fine. So the question would be, the strong argument on your end would be, because you're saying, well, I don't like, maybe there's a lot of confusion around originalism. I think the confusion stems from the fact that it doesn't seem to be applied in a consistent manner, but it's only applied for policy preference, and then it's applied under the guise of not being a policy preference. And I think if there were more writings from justices saying, man, I really hate this thing, but the plain text reading the Constitution just kind of, and the original interpretation times seems like it was this, then maybe there would be a difference of opinion there. But like, has there been a ruling where Kavanaugh or Thomas or Alito, where Roberts has written, like however painful this might be, like, and it seems to go against their political inclinations, but the originalist reading kind of favors, the more liberal side? Or is it just so that the originalist reading is pulled out every single time that just so happens to favor the conservative policy preferences of the 6-3 court?
So, the famous example of that is, I just had to pull it up because I couldn't remember, it's Texas v. Johnson, which is not current. It's a 1989 case, but that's the, I'm
saying of the current court.
Well, I'm answering this way because this is like, it's a Scalia case and he's the godfather of originalism. And in that case, he was the deciding vote that you were allowed to burn your own American flag, and has gone on record extensively saying that was he the czar of the universe, he would have done otherwise. Like, he thinks that it is a terrible thing to do, it is bad and immoral and evil, but the Constitution demands it. So yes, and if you look at his jurisprudence on a variety of, like,
I don't. I
People
understand what you're
know
saying,
about
but
it,
just on the little bit that I know about Scalia, I don't like using Scalia as an example because Scalia, to me, seemed like a conservative who wasn't fucking evil. I feel like Scalia would stand on principle, but I feel like if Scalia was on this court instead of people that should be shipped into the middle of the ocean like Thomas and Alito, I think that the immunity ruling would have been a 5-4 ruling with Amy joining the majority that would have ruled against presidential immunity. I think Scalia would have been on that side of like, obviously the president doesn't have immunity from being convicted of crimes when he's scheming and plotting and doing conspiracies, just because it might implicate some part of his job. Every crime that you do is going to implicate some part of your job if that's your job and you're doing it as part of your job.
Okay, if we're going to go back into immunity, we can, but I would say...
Well, sure, we don't have... I'm just curious if for this court, is there an originalist ruling that hurt them? Yeah.
Is, in my mind, Scalia's heir apparent. I mean, I think she was his clerk, and her jurisprudence is by far the closest to his of anybody on the court. And I can tell you, I mean, and she, in fact, did... God, I can't remember. What was the case? What was the one that all the conservatives were mad about because she flipped? And as a result, they lost?
I don't think it was a case. I think it was challenging a TRO, wasn't it?
I can't remember. I just remember that, like, for some reason, I spent, like, a fucking week on Twitter telling, like, fucking conservatives they need to calm the fuck down, and Justice Barrett is, like, a national treasure and not their enemy. I can't remember the name of the case.
I think it was after it was the day after this got released when Trump was talking to the nation, and then he shook fucking Robert's hand. I think it was after that day they released a 5-4 ruling against overturning a TRO. It might have had to do with the immigration stuff with Boasberg or whatever.
It was definitely an immigration case. I'll look it up. I don't have the details top of mind, but that was the one where everyone was fucking furious with her for doing what she thought was the right thing to do. And I very rarely have thought she was wrong. She's by far my favorite writer on the Supreme Court. But then there is like, and this is a weird corner of originalism, but there is like a very big difference in substance between like a Scalia-Barrett originalism and a Thomas originalism, which matters a lot if certain things come up. Like if there was a case that asked, should we overturn Obergefell, like the gay marriage case, Justice Thomas would vote yes. He would overturn that in a heartbeat. Justice Barrett wouldn't, I don't think. And because they have very different conceptions of originalism in that sense. And the meaningful difference there is that Justice Thomas believes that every decision needs to go back to the originalist root. Like, you have to be able to go back and justify it on originalist principles for it to be a valid decision. Whereas like a Justice Scalia, Justice Barrett would say like, there's decisions we disagree with, but unless they're like egregiously wrongly decided and there's some big problem with them that we're going to point out separate and apart from the originalist issue, like we're not going to go and unring every bell because that's so damaging to the rule of law. Like, we have to have res judicata, we have to have stability in the legal system. And that's a very big difference between those two schools of thought, which often is tricky because when you talk about like, am I defending originalism? Well, which originalism am I defending, right? Like, they can be very different in different circumstances.
Sure. Okay. We don't have to circle around on this topic. Is there anything else related to? I think we cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, we cover a lot of ground. When I'm yelling at a convoy, is your position that socialism is inherently immoral, meaning that if it could be enacted without some kind of like violent revolution, which probably would be necessary, but setting that aside, that it's an immoral end? Or is your point that like socialism's a problem because it points to all these idiots who do all this dumb stuff politically, or it points to Marxist Leninism? Like, what's your concern with it?
I just think socialism is a much less efficient way of organizing the economy, that all of the outcomes would be far worse.
Okay, so it's a utilitarian objective. It's not like a rights-based objection, but you just think in practice it would be worse.
I think in practice it would be much worse, yes.
Yeah, okay. And then, because I know you did this with Richard Wolff, and since I'm talking to you, maybe you'll save me some time. I don't have to go back and look at it. How the fuck does anyone run a business in a socialist system? Like, how do you have to like apply for a permit or something? Like, what does that look like?
Depends. If you ask 100 socialists, you'll get 100 different answers on that. There's a lot of people that Socialism is a lot like originalism. Everybody has their own variation of it, I'll just say that much. All right.
That's funny. Yeah. Okay.
Have you heard of the term a command economy?
Yeah.
Sure. So some socialists will say that, or maybe they'll say it's communism here, or some people say it's like not communism because you can't have a council or whatever. I don't know. Some people will say that in a command economy, you make what the government tells you to make, and that's it. So that's what you make. Other people say Vosh used to be like a market syndicalist or a market socialist or something, where everybody has co-ops, so you still respond to market forces. So the things that you make just depend on what customers walk into the store and buy, and then. Yeah, so it's going to be some difference between these two things, but there's going to be dramatically different answers based on what somebody's concept of socialism is. Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see if you want to see me and Econoboy argue about this. That's going to happen sometime next week. And if you want to tell me how dog shit my originalist positions are, I have a YouTube channel that nobody watches where I have a video explaining what the case for originalism, and you can you do your classic DGG level commentary there, which I'm sure I'll enjoy.
Okay. Thanks for chatting. I do appreciate it. It's been fun shouting at you. Just for your argument, keep this in mind because it's a tricky one, okay? Because people do this. When people talk about socialist policies or people talk about like liberal policies, the framework within these things, within the systems where these happen, are very important. So socialists can play a very tricky game where they'll point out certain socialist policies that might be good. They're social policies, but they'll say they're good because they're socialist policies. But it's important to remember that these are happening within a liberal framework. The reason why it's important to point that out, in my opinion, is because within a liberalist framework, there's a lot of things that can happen, good capitalist things and good socialist things, if you want to call them that. But in the socialist framework, you necessarily must exclude any of the quote-unquote good liberal capitalist things. And I think that's the difference. So careful when they try to say, well, this social policy, isn't it good? What if we could have more of those? It's like, sure, but in your world, we would have none of the liberal capitalist ones. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm very much on team classic liberal. Like, I think there are just certain rights that people have. And when you start truncating them, especially in the massive and systematic way that you would need to enact socialism, you've put the cart before the horse. Like, no matter how good your end might be, it doesn't justify that. It's just too much.
I understand what you're saying there, but if you try to take like a rights-based approach to this or something like that, the difficult arguments you're going to run into is the socialist is going to flip it on you, and he's going to say, well, right now you're supporting the status quo, and the status quo necessarily already has the mandate of so much violence to maintain the current order. So you might say something like, in a socialist system, you would have to steal somebody's business or whatever, and the socialist is going to say, well, in the capitalist system, when I wake up and I have no food, I am literally, by violence, because I can't steal food, I'm going to be killed. I have to go to a store, and I can't grow food because the government owns the fucking territory or whatever. I have to go to a job where an employer is necessarily going to be stealing from the value that I produce, and then I'm going to have to buy something from somebody else. Like, that, there's going to be violence at every stage here. So if you are going to go the violent route argument, then you need very sophisticated forms of argumentation for why the violence that exists in a capitalist state, and we all agree every state has some form of violence it needs to, is somehow more moral or better than the violence that would exist bringing about the socialist state.
I always find that this is, one of the things I argue about a lot, and it's hard to explain to people who aren't like super invested in the topic, is that why I don't consider positive rights to be rights. Like there is a difference between like a core negative right, like free speech, right to bear arms, due process. These are all negative rights, and the positive right, like you're talking about, like, oh well, do you have a right to food? It's like, well, once you call that a right, then you have established a state that can enforce that right. You must, because how else could you have that right? It doesn't exist on its own. It's not inalienable. It's not something that's vested in you by who you are. It's a totally different thing. And I think one of the linguistic tricks that are often used is lumping in things like the right to education, right to healthcare, right to food with rights like the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, which are of a totally different type and category.
I kind of understand and agree with what you're saying there, but I don't do a lot of constitutional positive negative rights debates. But the crude notion in my head is that without some positive rights, the negative rights are essentially meaningless. So, for instance, like for the is it Sixth or Fourth Amendment that says no unreasonable search and seizure? Is that Fourth Amendment?
Fourth.
Or sixth. Okay. So like that's a right, negative right. So in chat, a negative right is like, this is something that you just have. It's part of you. It's not provided to you. This is just a thing you're, assumed to have. And then the state protects that negative right. But a positive right is like the thing is provided to you. So like in a lot of states, you have the right to an attorney, right? To represent you, at least in criminal matters, right?
Yeah. So that's, that's technically a negative right also.
Really? Why?
Because what the Constitution actually says is we can't charge you with a crime if we don't give you an attorney. We could also just not charge you.
It's in the Constitution says that guarantees your right to.
Yeah, it's Sixth Amendment.
If it does, okay, hold on. Let me just let me show this order. But even if it does, why wouldn't that be a positive right?
Because it's a restriction on the government. The government cannot charge you with a crime unless you have an attorney or you make one available. They could, of course, just not charge you with a crime. Your right is to not be charged without a crime. And I feel like
isn't that kind of a tricky
of the negative positive distinction is negative rights are restrictions on government power. Positive rights are guarantees. They're things that are provided to you, whereas negative rights prevent the government from doing things.
But isn't that kind of? I feel like we could play games there to make any positive right then a negative right. No.
How so?
Like, for instance, I could say, I passed the 50th Amendment. I don't know how many minutes we have right now, right? I passed the 0th Amendment, and the 0th Amendment is the government. How would I phrase this? Something along the lines of like you're guaranteed like not to be unreasonably arrested, like as long as you're not starving to death or something. You can't be arrested for stealing food as long as you are satiated. So then somebody now has the positive right if they're allowed to walk into any store, like steal whatever they want. No, that wouldn't be a positive. That would be negative. I'm trying to think how you would phrase this. But like if you were to make conditional the negative right on something being provided to you, I feel like you've just snuck in a positive right, because that is a thing that has to be provided to the person, right?
Well, no, because the government can just choose not to prosecute them.
Because the government can just choose not to prosecute them.
If the government chooses to prosecute them, then the right to counsel kicks in. But it's the government is attempting to do something to you. They're attempting to put you in prison. Like the government is attempting to use its force against you, and there's a limitation on how it's allowed to do that, which is pretty different than like, you are guaranteed, 3 meals a day. That's the government must give this to you, not a limitation on government power. And in fact, it's the opposite, because if you're guaranteed 3 meals a day, the government needs to have the power to do that, which implies a whole bunch of other stuff. Like it has to have all these taxing powers. It has to have the power to employ cooks. It has to have delivery workers, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. I think I would agree with that then. Wait, in your mind, are there any positive rights that are conferred by the Constitution or all the amendments, or?
No. And this is actually like a major distinction. Like in US, a lot of the reason why it depends on the treaty, but when people ask like, why isn't the US a member of like various like UN human rights charters and stuff like that? It's because they guarantee positive rights. And the US doesn't guarantee positive rights on the federal levels. The states do. But on the federal level, we don't do that. And it's just kind of it's a big difference in what you think a right is. And it totally changes what government is if you think that people have these rights that cannot be changed. Because, once it's a right, you can't change it through the democratic process. That's the thing. Like if you have the right to education, Congress can't change that. Like that's yours now forever, right? So these are big limitations on what can be done through democracy.
Okay. All right. Well, so your argument against socialism is going to boil down to that positive negative rights thing.
I don't know if it's going to boil down to it, but I think that's a big part of it. I think that the certain of the core negative rights that are guaranteed by our Constitution or just referenced in the Declaration of Independence, the right to pursue liberty, like that that is like the pursuit of liberty is deeply violated in a world where I need to ask the government whether or not I am allowed to, profit off of this conversation. Like I need, I need a license to then, be a streamer or whatever, whatever else you're going to do, because you would need the consent of all the different people who would vote for that and socialize it. You can't just do that on your own. And that seems to me to be a pretty core violation of kind of like our sense of who we are as people and what makes life worth living and doing. Some of it is our right to self-determination, or at minimum, our right to self-ownership and the right to alienate our labor.
Okay. If he makes the argument that, at least in an outcome-based way, if socialism was our mode of economy versus capitalism, that those negative rights, you would be able to pursue all of those in a much greater manner, what would your counter be to that?
I mean, I don't think he's right. I mean, how would you're saying if in a socialist system
Mhm.
you had more freedom,
Yes.
how would that even be possible? Like, I mean, because
Well, most socialists are going to agree with that outright. They're going to say, they'll say things like, well, in a capitalist system, the easiest example from our childhood was when people would have chronic conditions and they work for a company. And because our health insurance comes through a company before the ACA, you were kind of like fucking chained to that company forever because nobody's going to take you on a new insurance policy without it being exorbitant. But like, so they say things like, oh yeah, you're like enslaved to your job. You can't travel, you can't move, you can't do anything. You're locked here forever because you can't afford anything. But in a socialist world, where the working and the income is more equal or whatever bullshit, you have more freedoms to enjoy things in your life or to pursue things that are individualistic, whatever bullshit. Yeah.
And this is exactly why socialists conflate negative and positive rights. Because
Mm-hmm.
like the right to healthcare, that's a positive right. The right to travel, that's a positive right. Like these are all positive rights. And conflating them is very useful for a socialist. Because
Well, I don't know if they'd say, I wouldn't say that these are necessarily, like, I don't know if we're talking about rights here. I think we're just talking about like opportunities or like protections of those positive rights, I guess.
well, okay, like let me give you an example. Like this is a debate I had with not like a real life friend who kind of leans in this direction. So maybe it's helpful. Um, I was making the point that Elon Musk and I enjoy the same freedom of speech. And he's like, well, that's crazy because Elon Musk has much bigger reach than you. He has so much money. He has orders of magnitude. I mean, many, many orders of magnitude more reach than you and has a totally different capacity to broadcast his views than you. You do not have the same freedom of speech. It's like, no, the freedom is the same. His capacity is different. Right. And like that's the core difference. Like I'm not owed a megaphone. Right. What I'm
Sure, I
owed
understand what
is
you're saying there. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with you in terms of the vocabulary, but I think most people, like, if we were to have the most hyperbolic hellscape capitalist system where 99.99% of the wealth is controlled by one guy, and all of us had one social media that we could be banned from, and we all had one car company that could disallow you as a customer, and we all, like, nobody would care that you had all the negative rights in the world if effectively you couldn't access any of the freedoms associated with those negative rights. And that's where the socialists, I think, would argue that you can have all the negative rights that you want, but it wouldn't matter if you didn't have the economic opportunity to pursue that or to do something
yeah,
that would
and
allow you to enjoy that right, yeah.
that's their ultimate trick, right? That's the trick is that they by conflating the two, then they can say that these certain core rights, these rights, by the way, are so core that in my mind that they are like I mean, does your audience know sufficient necessary? Like logic stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
Okay. They would be the necessary foundation of a just government. Whereas, like, if your government does not have due process, you're probably justified in rebelling, right? Like that would be a reason
So, like,
to.
this is the issue. I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
and so this is where I would push on, like, the hardcore philosophy. So let's say that you're saying that it would be necessary to be a free people to have due process, right? However, what if I pointed you to a world where in the United States of America you do have due process, but the only criminal attorneys available to you were clones of Lauren De Laguna, and all of the attorney generals in every state were the most ardent prosecutors ever. If you got charged with a crime, you're basically always going to be convicted, right? And then let's say in another country you actually had no guaranteed due process, but all of the prosecutors working there all had this very strong moral commitment to make sure they only charged people that they thought were really guilty of crimes, and they try to be as careful as possible. When you got charged with a crime, like, you didn't have Fifth Amendment protections. You have to inform on yourself or whatever, right? But let's say that, like, the difference in those two worlds pragmatically, like, the people with the less negative rights actually enjoyed the implications of that negative right more. I think that's where people are going to fight you, right? Do you understand what I'm getting at? That, like,
No,
you might have some negative freedoms entailing.
I
Yeah,
absolutely do. And like it's
sure.
a really interesting area, right? Because one of the
Oh, the
one
real life implication is a Section 230 right now, right? Where conservatives are like, fuck, this is bullshit. We don't have freedom of speech if we don't have a right to these social media platforms, right? But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a really interesting thing where if you read the like the equivalent of the Bill of Rights from like the USSR era Russia, it's like much better than ours on paper. The rights
Yeah,
are so
Scalia talks about
profound.
this in that one thing,
It's like
yeah.
unbelievable all the stuff they guaranteed. The problem is their system of government had no structures that prevented those things from being fucking useless and ignored, right?
Mhm.
So one aspect of what's important in society, the just society, is protection of negative rights. Another is limitations on government power. And like one thing a socialist would have to explain to me setting aside the violent revolution point, is how the fuck do you get around the takings clause? Like, the government has to
The what
give
clause?
the takings clause of the Constitution. The
Okay.
government has to give just compensation when they seize private property. Like, if you're going to seize every business in the world and redistribute it, how the fuck are you doing that?
I mean, I'd be careful on that because for a condo boy, he'll just argue that I think he almost said this. You can just print however much money you want. The government could theoretically do this very easily, right? That would be the easy part. Is they could do just compensation. They would just print the money from the Treasury, Federal Reserve, and then they would dole it out to people, right?
So his utilitarian argument would be that we would create the most massive inflation in history, destroy the economy, and then redistribute. I mean, I guess they could. I mean, at that point, it's just like maybe they have enough votes to amend the Constitution and get rid of the takings clause, and maybe that's the answer. But this, I mean,
Sure.
We're getting truly pie in the sky at this point.
Well, I mean, I would argue all socialism is, but yeah.
That is kind of the hallmark, yeah. Anyway,
Okay,
it should be a lot. It should be a lot of fun. The condo boy seems like a nice guy. I don't know him well, but he seems like a nice guy.
He is. He's a good dude. Okay. Well, hey, listen, I love you. Be careful. Have fun with your conversation.
Hey, man, always a pleasure. Hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, stay safe. Be careful.